Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting, but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Susan Durant, Chair of Planning Committee. Before we commence, I'd like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We're not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by the way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber on my right. When you've left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is the public square in front of Cast beyond the fountain. I'd like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded, and by entering the council chamber, you accept that you will be recorded and your images retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting, you will need to press the large red button underneath the microphone and ensure the red light is illuminated, and this will ensure that you are recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering today. If any member of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of an application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. Item 1 is apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillor Emma Muddiman-Rawlins. Are there any other apologies? No, thank you for that. Item 2 is exclusion of public and press. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3, any declarations of interest, please? Anybody that needs to complete a declaration of interest form can receive one from the Governance Office. Item 4 is the minutes of the Planning Committee, which was held on the 10th of December 2024. Can the minutes be moved as a true and accurate record? Is that seconded? And is that agreed? Thank you, everybody. Item 5 is the schedule of applications. Application number 1 is the change of use of land to the Fear Factory, which is a visitor attraction, and direction and installation of associated marquees, event structures, 6 shipping containers together with associated works, including extension of a car park, and also this is at Thornhurst Manor, and it's retrospective. So Susie Boyce is a planning case officer that will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, the application at Thornhurst Manor, as Chair has mentioned, is a retrospective application which seeks full planning permission at land at Thornhurst Manor. The application was first brought to the 10th of December Planning Committee due to significant public interest, and it was deferred for a site visit to allow members to assess the impact of the development to the woodland and the level of mitigation that would be required to enable the restoration of the woodland. That took place on Friday at 10 a.m. And then secondly, also so that members could get further details on the mitigation required to restore the woodland. Just a few pre-committee amendments to run through. We've had a request to speak from the applicant, Mr. Laurie Murray, and also the agent, Shane Marsh. And we've also received a late additional representation. This was emailed directly to committee members on Sunday. We have subsequently had the representatives' permission to publish this on the website. The points raised where material will be addressed as part of my presentation. So just a very quick reminder of the application site. The red line development area comprises about 0.75 hectares of land at Fawnhurst Manor. Fawnhurst Manor comprises a golf course, a restaurant, bar and wedding events menu to the west of, to the east of Doncaster Road. The application seeks retrospective permission for the retention of a number of structures associated with the Fear Factory, which is a visitor attraction held over the course of 2 weeks every October, which has been going on for the last 5 years. So Marquee 1, Fear Factory, Marquee 2, Chasm, a number of other structures, the abandoned church, the Pogo Club, and then finally Marquee 3, which is a wedding associated with the existing wedding functions at Fawnhurst Manor. And then also finally there's an unauthorised car park extension at the north of the site there. Previously this was larger, but part of that's being proposed to be provided as a new biodiversity enhancement area instead. So the application lies wholly within the Doncaster Greenbelt on the local plan. It's also a designated local wildlife site, the 16-acre plantation. It's a priority habitat, deciduous woodland, and it also lies within a 500-metre buffer zone to an ancient semi-natural woodland at Alston Wood. So the following presentation won't reiterate my previous representation. Most of the details are, well, all of the details are in my original officers' report and the addendum report that I was before you. But I'm going to briefly outline the key points that have been made in this addendum report. So the site visit that took place on Friday, we had a request by a committee member who wasn't able to attend that to provide some photos and outline the key points that were discussed at the site visit. I'll briefly go through some of the changes brought by the recent update to the National Planning Policy Framework, which was released 2 days after the last Planning Committee. Mitigation measures, there are full details in your report, but I'll briefly outline those today as well. Likewise, permitted development fallback positions, which was a matter raised at the last Planning Committee. There was some confusion at the last committee about some of the differences between different regimes to do with trees, so the difference between felling licences and planning powers. Looking a little bit more at the level of harm to trees and woodland that's taken place, as well as the points raised by the late representation. So first of all, just a quick outline of the site visit that took place on Friday. I'll take you through a series of photos and just point out some of the key discussion points or questions that were asked by members. So here on the slides we have the ticket office and some of the new pathways, including some of the soil decompaction measures that have already taken place and the cordoning off of some of the root protection areas. And the tree officer explained on site that root protection and compaction issues may have occurred and might cause decline in trees, but it's not impossible to recover from the damage, but that is a question of time and the type of soil. This is the abandoned church structure. Members went inside to see how the structure had been built around the scaffolding. They asked about fire alarms. The applicant explained the emergency alarms and the evacuation procedures that are in place, albeit those are matters that do not fall within the planning regime as material considerations. So particular trees were pointed out to members that have been mentioned in the officer's report. This includes a tree T290, which the Fear Factory structure had been placed next to, and then the mounded soil was also pointed out. This is the clearing. Members noticed light strung between the trees along the walkways, asked if this could cause harm, And the tree officer explained that provided the string was not tied too tightly and was regularly loosened, this shouldn't cause the trees any problem. It was also suggested that changing which trees the lights were hung from would help. So at the Pogo Club structure, the silver birch tree in the foreground here was noted as still being alive but with some damage, and that it could recover, but the timing's unknown. On the left here is a tree adjacent to the chasm structure, T421, as being an affected tree, and also the tree in the log cabin structure were both pointed out to members as trees impacted by the development. And then finally, the car park extension was seen. The red cones in the left-hand picture here show where the car park that's proposed for retention would end. That's in the background, and then in the foreground, that would be the new biodiversity enhancement area. And the photo on the right here shows leftover spoil, which appeared to be scrapings from the creation of the car park extension, which had been put at the side of the new car park against the trees. So moving on. So yes, the MPPF has been updated. There's a number of changes that have been brought that have come through that. There's essentially two key areas which are relevant to this application. There's been updates to particularly greenbelt policy, including the introduction of the concept of grey belt, which is land which does not strongly contribute to the purposes of including land within the greenbelt. The site has the potential to be considered as grey belt land. However, the MPPF also requires that a number of other tests are met if development on grey belt land is still to be considered as not inappropriate development. These include that there should be a demonstrable need for the type of development that's proposed, and also that the development is in a sustainable location. And the Fawnhurst Manor development does not meet the tests of these two latter points, and this means that development for greenbelt policy purposes would still be considered inappropriate development in the greenbelt, and therefore very special circumstances still need to be demonstrated. And in terms of very special circumstances, there's been a change to paragraph 87 of the MPPF that introduces the idea of the support of the economic growth and resilience of industries of local, regional or national importance, and that would apply to the tourism industry, which is relevant to this development. And this also has the potential to contribute towards whether very special circumstances can be demonstrated. So to do this, you'd need to demonstrate the overall need for new tourism development. This is something that would require quite extensive work, and it was agreed with the applicant that that scale of supporting work wouldn't be reasonable to ask for an application of this scale, and so it's been agreed that they would rely on the visitor survey that's already been submitted to demonstrate how the development contributes towards the tourism industry at a local and regional level. There should also be evidence of economic benefit. This is already a matter that's been considered as part of the previous assessment. And then whether or not there's a locational requirement for the development in this specific proposed location. And the authority's view is that it hasn't been demonstrated that it's required in this specific spot. The woodland setting may be part of its character, but it doesn't need to be in the greenbelt. It could be elsewhere. And just to conclude, the recommendations, particularly in terms of greenbelt, are still that it's inappropriate development and that very special circumstances do not exist which outweigh the harm that's been identified both in greenbelt terms and in other respects. So just moving on, members requested more details about mitigation measures. So very broadly, these encompass the points you can see on the screen. So biodiversity enhancement area, tree root protection areas, tree-specific measures where particular trees have been shown to have been harmed, and measures that are needed to counteract that. Conditions would be used to, if planning permission were granted against the officer recommendation, would be used to secure construction environmental management plan, habitat management and monitoring plan, biosecurity method statement, an ecological enhancement plan, and other measures to minimise potential harm to protected species. The full details can be found at paragraph 3.1 of the addendum report. Other measures, paragraphs 4.2 to 4.7 of the report address comments made at the last committee with respect to potential permitted development fallback positions, and provides further detail as to why the LPA considers that the development does require planning permission, and why there is no permitted development fallback position for the fear factory element of the development. Paragraphs 4.9 to 14 explains the difference between the felling licensing regime and the planning regime. The takeaway points here is that the loss of trees and woodland is a material consideration in the planning process. In terms of the licensing regime, no retrospective license can be granted for any illegal felling that has already taken place. And regardless of whether planning permission is refused or granted, the landowner may still be liable to the enforcement powers of the Forestry Commission for any illegal felling that's taken place. And then in response to a suggestion at the last committee that the harm to trees at the site had been overstated, paragraphs 4.14 to 4.17 provide further information on the quality of trees harmed by the development. Table 1 on the slide here and in the addendum report breaks down the levels of harm into different categories and summarises the number of trees or groups of trees within each category. And then Appendix 3 of the addendum report compiles the tree-specific assessments from the applicant's own supporting tree survey as a breakdown of the quality of each of these groups of trees or individual trees. So most of the trees or groups of trees impacted, that's 16 by the development, have been awarded a quality rating of low or unsuitable for retention. 7 have been given a medium quality rating, and only 3 have been given a high quality rating. So that's the trees that were impacted. It's worth noting that so without an assessment of the health of the trees prior to this tree survey and prior to the development having taken place, it's difficult to definitively establish whether the trees categorised as a particular quality may or may not previously have been placed in a higher quality or indeed a lower quality category. And similarly, if damage has only occurred recently, then any kind of subsequent degradation to the health of the tree may take time to show itself. And so it's best to take a cautious approach to these categories, and instead it's better to look at the survey's specific commentary for evidence of specific damage to the trees, such as scarring, root scraping, soil compaction in the root areas, to gain a better understanding of the impact of the development to trees at the site. But yes, just to confirm that it does remain the view of officers that there has been clear harm caused by the development to trees at the site, and that to retain it would lead to the continued degradation of the woodland and the local wildlife site. And then finally, the late representation that was received on Sunday, this was an objection. It was submitted by a member of the public who has previously submitted an objection to the development, but it does raise a few additional points which haven't previously been mentioned, and so I'll broadly outline them.
I've not seen a copy of this because I was emailed it and I believe that it really, so I haven't had a copy of what
It's available in the public domain. It was made available yesterday, but it hasn't been emailed.
Considering I haven't seen it, I don't know about anybody else, but it's not been sent to me officially by council. I know it's sent by members of the public, but I just deleted it because I don't engage with anybody on planning issues.
I think that's fine, Councillor Stapleton. The planning officer has uploaded it to the website. She summarised the issues raised in her presentation. So I think that's absolutely fine for you to take into account what she's told you in terms of the presentation. The fact that you haven't read it, I don't think particularly matters because you've been told what the issues were in the email. Susie can re-summarise it for you if you like. Yeah.
Yes. So broadly speaking, the matters fall into material planning considerations and non-material planning considerations. So first of all, there was mention of a number of inconsistencies and inaccuracies in the supporting information. So first of all, it was suggested that whilst the transport assessment states there'll be a maximum capacity of 200 visitors per night, the agent mentioned at the last committee that there would be 300. The transport statement does indeed say 200, and it's worth noting that there's the difference between what has happened previously and what is being applied for planning permission for. So the event management plan that has been accepted by the highways officer says 200 visitors per night, and that if planning permission were granted, that could be controlled by condition because the event management plan would form part of any list of approved plans. The second point raised was health and safety, but again that relates to the capacity of the event, which I've already mentioned. The visitor survey was highlighted that was not carried out independently. That was covered in the previous officer's report, and limited weight was given to that. A point was raised about why are customers being allowed to pay upon arrival rather than pre-book. Again, this relates to the way the event has been managed in the past, and it's being proposed that going forwards all tickets will be pre-booked prior to the event, and that will be part of the visitor control measures. A point about fire service access was raised. That would fall into the non-material consideration category because that's a matter that's covered by building regulations and not the planning regime. Likewise, premises licensing, not a planning matter. A point was raised about employment figures. Are people actually employed or are they volunteers? This is potentially a material planning consideration, but actually the contribution towards job creation was always considered as only giving very limited positive weight to the economic benefit of the application anyway, given that it's only for 2 weeks of the year. And so, yes, whilst material, that doesn't greatly affect the overall conclusions. And then, yes, yeah, that's all the points addressed. So just to conclude, the reasons for refusal remain the same, except for a number of NPPF paragraph numbers have been updated. The recommendation is still to refuse the application by virtue of it being inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, for which no very special circumstances have been demonstrated. The harm to the local wildlife site and priority habitat, and to trees and woodland at the site. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We've got Mr. Laurie Murray, the applicant, and Mr. Shane Marsh from Building Link Design, the agent. They've requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity. to speak to the committee for up to 5 minutes collectively. And please press the red button when you want to speak and press it again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission. And I will let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Dear councillors, first and foremost, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to each of you for taking the time out of your schedule to visit the site in person. I truly appreciate the commitment to understanding the full scope of the application, which has now cost us around £37,000. I won't take upon your time by repeating what you've already likely gathered from your visit, that this application brings significant benefits to Doncaster, and I trust that seeing it firsthand has allowed you to inform your own informed opinions. I would like to express my gratitude for the open-minded approach you've taken in reviewing this proposal. It's clear that you've considering what's best for the community and the future of Doncaster, rather than relying solely on the government policy recommendations. Your willingness to prioritise the greater good for our city does not go unnoticed. Instead of dwelling further on the merits of the application, I would rather open the floor to any questions you may have regarding how we operate this event. And for the past 5 years, we have run this event with the utmost professionalism, and I'm proud to say we have received 0 complaints during that time. Transparency and community engagement have always been the heart of what we do. Our city needs more events like this, not just for the enjoyment of and enrichment of our residents, but to attract much needed tourism from outside of Doncaster. Events like ours bring vitality and economic growth and the strong sense of community spirit. Once again, thank you for your time and your thoughtful considerations and dedication to Doncaster's future.
Good afternoon, Chair. Whilst I've registered to speak, I'm here today to just support the applicant and committee in any questions they may raise after Laurie's had his speech. Nothing really to add to what I said at last committee.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Therefore, committee members, are there any questions that you would like to ask the applicant or the agent regarding this? Councillor Beach.
Yes. Can you tell me how many people you had visit the attraction in this year, or the year just gone? Because I've had several different figures. Do you know within a few how many came, please?
Yes. I got asked this at the last time and I wasn't able to. I didn't have the figures on me. But over the total 19 nights we were open, we had a total of 5,368 guests.
Sorry, and how many nights was that, did you say?
19. The representation is incorrect. With 10 nights we were open.
Oh, I see. So how does that equate to saying there's 200, even 300? Because if you had 5,368 people, even on 14 nights, that's 383 a night. Now, I know they wouldn't be spread evenly, and I suspect that most would be early evening with small children. So, which brings me to a health and safety thing, but also to the fact that the car parking, the car park is not that large, and you know, you would impinge on the hotel car parking, which is not a thing you should be doing. So I just don't know how you arrive at the figures.
Yeah, it's just, again, it wasn't 14 nights, it's 19 nights. And if you do want, I have printed off the ticketing report that says every night's numbers, if you would like them individually.
I'll take your word for it, but I can do the figures. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions that anybody would like to ask the applicant or the agent? Councillor John Mounsey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming, Mr. Mayor. Nice to see you again. Take it on a side what Irish speech you said there. Could you tell us...
Councillor Mounsey, could you move your microphone slightly closer because it's difficult to hear you? Thank you.
For once. To Mr. Murray, regarding the jobs, and tourism, and also the economy. What numbers have you got that you would say justifies this plan application? Because there are good things in there. I can see some slight potential of what you're saying here. But if you would describe to me and the rest of the colleagues here today, the jobs, how many jobs, how many tourists, and the economy, what effect is that having?
So again, the objection for me was a little bit incorrect. We do not have any volunteers that are in operations, safety, anything positions like that. The only volunteers we do have are in the cast, and that is because we get them from local community colleges, and that is the only volunteers. So as a full team of paid employees, whether that's working on the night or all year round, it's 180 jobs. And they are all paid. So with the objection saying we rely mostly on volunteers, I'd say the volunteers in the cast are around 15 to 20.
Councillor Mounsey, don't forget your microphone, please.
I keep forgetting that, yes, sorry. So how many of those 180 people will be employed as jobs on the fear factory itself?
All 180 on an operating night, it would be around 100.
And tourism, what's your numbers on tourism? Have you got any numbers that can back you up?
Yeah, so we've got, with the ticketing system, it shows demographics of which area of the country and the world now that people travel from for the event.
And on the economy, what effect would it affect the economy of the north of Doncaster? Because you're smack in the middle there where you are.
Yeah, so we submitted the visitor report review that we surveyed everyone that attended this year. Obviously not everyone filled the survey in, which is impossible, but for the ones that did, give us a good open-minded approach to what we are bringing into Doncaster.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does any other committee member wish to ask a question? Councillor Hogarth. Councillor Mounsey, thank you.
Just to clarify, you said there were about 200,
Councillor Hogarth, can you put your microphone on, please? Thank you.
about 200 a night or a day. And yet 19 nights, 5,000, it comes to 263. So I'm sure on some of the days there would have been probably in excess of 300.
No, the highest night was 300, all the rest were below 300. We take tickets off sale at 280 to allow, and after we take them off sale, we then advise the public not to attend the event and don't travel because you won't get in. However, if people do arrive on site, we do have the extra 20 people to make the judgment on the night if it is going to cause more trouble, sending them away to just letting them in. So we've got the 20 people spare tickets on the evening to make sure we would never oversell online.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, thank you both for your presentation. Committee members, we're now going to go into debate. Do you have any comments or questions to the officer? Councillor Stapleton, then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I was intrigued about is you put together mitigation in the event that the panel decides to ignore officer's advice and grant permission. Are we then saying that because there is mitigation measures there, it's a two-part question. First of all, have the applicants discussed and agreed with this mitigation plan that's in place in the event of this happening? And secondly, would that satisfy, from a planning perspective, that needs are then being met?
So the mitigation measures have largely been compiled from the applicant's own supporting surveys and recommendations. So they submitted a fairly comprehensive tree survey, and their tree consultant produced an addendum report clearly setting out the mitigation measures that they'd recommend. Likewise, an ecological appraisal was submitted, and that detailed the different measures that should be taken place. Those have been supplemented by the ecology officers and tree officers who are here in case you want to ask them any questions. And so those, so for example, an ecological enhancement plan, a construction, environmental management plan, etc. Those would be attached via condition if planning permission were granted. We wouldn't need per se the agreement of the applicant, although in practice it's useful to discuss it with them, as they wouldn't be pre-commencement conditions because it's already taken place. In terms of whether they'd be sufficient to address the harm, officers' view is that it would only go a certain way to address the harm. It would not fully address the harm, but it would be what could be done rather than, yeah.
Thank you. I think somewhere in there was the answer. And I get it, it's a complicated thing. However, maybe I'm just a simple Yorkshire lad, but mitigation to me means you've looked at something and we can do this to mitigate the problem. And mitigation, I'm sure, is a legal term as well. So the way I'm doing this, if we, as officers, we've come up with a mitigation plan, it basically allows, or I'm not saying, it gives the committee an opportunity to say, do you know what, we actually support this in principle, but we recognise the issues. And like I think I said at the last time this came before committee, I recognise that mistakes have obviously been made. I'm sure the applicants do as well. And I think I'd rather see this authority and this planning committee working with the applicant, with mitigation, to make this a good thing for everybody, rather than what I seem to be very harshly just dismissing it. And I think that's partly because when I look at this, when you look at the objections, I mean, even business Doncaster supports it. You know, as a council, we are actively supporting it. Most of the mitigation, from memory, what I've read, were all to do with ecology, which seems to be the only place we're getting any sort of professional issues around. So personally, I just think that if we have put mitigation in place and council is of a mind to grant planning permission, in essence, you've done yourself out of a job, really, haven't you? Because you've given us the mitigation, you've given us the reason, really, to actually allow it to go forward. That's my opinion. And I fully understand legally we don't have to discuss it with the applicant, the mitigation. I just think, that's something potentially we could have done. We could have probably even done it before it came here. If that was brought up, those mitigations were brought, it may have never even come to committee. I'm sorry, there's no question there. Sorry, Chair.
No, that's fine. I've got... Yeah.
So just to clarify, these mitigation measures were considered as part of the original planning assessment, and the overall assessment concluded that even with these mitigation measures, the harm still outweighs the benefits. And this list was provided because members requested it at the last committee.
Okay, thank you. Right, so committee members, I've got Councillor Steve Cox, followed by Councillor Charlie Hogarth, followed by Councillor Iris Speed. So, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I think Gary's covered most of what I was going to say, this has been running for 5 years, and thank you to everybody that attended that site meeting. It was absolutely fantastic and well worth attending. So, brilliant, thank you. And now there's a marker in the sand, if you like, of where that damage is and what that damage is done or not done, because there's no, it couldn't be that, we know that it could have contributed to the damage of the trees, but there's nothing in there, if I'm right, that says that it is definitely that's caused the damage. Now there's a marker in the sand that we could say that no more damage can be tolerated, then I would move that we vote to grant them a planning permission.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cox. We'll go to Councillor Hogarth, then to Councillor Beach, but I fully understand what both of you are saying, because obviously this mitigation's been mentioned. However, it's stated that the mitigation doesn't go the whole way to protect the harm that's already been done. well, maybe we need to look at a condition that will make sure that what other mitigations can be done to get it to that level. So yeah, Councillor Hogarth and Councillor.
Yeah, just to clarify, can you think of any reason why they would not do a budget survey 2 weeks prior to the 2024 event, even though they knew that they should recommend that they do one?
Was that to be? I think that's one for the applicant to answer as to why they didn't carry that out. It was very clear in the ecological survey recommendations.
Councillor Beach.
Yes, I have several comments which I think probably would best be answered by either Martin or Andrea. And it's about, there's the one building built round a tree. There's another one with a fake wall basically leaning up it. But one of my big concerns is where they've scraped all the surface off for the extension of the car park. It has all been piled up along a tree line to about, well, I suppose it's getting on for 4 foot. And how much damage is that doing to the trees? And, you know, will the trees survive, you know, properly and grow as they should with all that pushed up there? Because are they getting the water they need, in fact?
Thank you. We saw on the site visits areas where, for a start, we could see where the large clearance was, and the applicants were saying, we haven't taken any trees out. But a woodland is more than trees. A woodland is understory. It is tall shrubs, short shrubs, grasses, mosses, all of that. So you could say there were no trees removed, but how much of the understory of the woodland was decimated? And in respect of the damage to trees, I think maybe Andrea can sort of give us a bit more information on that.
Yeah, regarding the damage to trees, piling up as the picture shows there will have a detrimental effect to trees because the feeder roots and the ones that get the oxygen and the water are usually quite close to the surface. They're quite close to the surface for a reason, because they need to actually gain oxygen. Now, putting a pile of, it is known that piling up soils around a tree will actually prevent that tree now from being able to get the oxygen via the roots as it should, and it can actually make the tree go into decline. It usually does. It doesn't necessarily happen immediately. Sometimes it'll take 2 to 5 years. They become a drought or something like that. Then that again would sort of like overly affect them. You were talking about the trees in the building itself. Now, clearly that tree isn't getting any of the water it would have normally received. We don't know what's happening under the ground there, so we don't know whether or not there has been any scraping of soils or soils piled up around it as well. But clearly it's going to affect the tree because the roots system around the tree is used to, or would have been used to, gaining water and nutrients from there. Clearly with a building over it now, that wouldn't take place.
And if I could just add also that we saw in a number of photographs the different levels of different ground levels throughout, and that's what that one in particular there. And you can say that within that big mound there is quite a few cubic meters of woodland soil which has been piled up. Now, I can't, from an ecological perspective, I can't see how that can be mitigated for, nor can it be put right, put in surface paths through an ancient, through a priority woodland habitat. It just shouldn't happen from an ecological point of view, and you cannot fully mitigate, for that sort of damage.
would you do your microphone for me, please? Councillor Mounsey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure, Chair, which one I should direct to our officers or to Mr Murray here, but when you look at pages 24 to 25, where the pictures show from 2015 to 2023, our tree experts sat there, and you, Mr Murray, could have an answer to this, please. How many trees would you think has been took out to create that clearing there in those years between 2015 and 2023 during this last year? That's my question, Chair.
Susie, are you going to answer that one, please?
Might direct that to a tree officer, Andrea, if you're...
I mean, it's very difficult to put a precise number on the number of trees that's gone there, but you can see that there's been a gradual degradation from what is a very dense piece of woodland to a clearing. So clearly there are quite a lot of trees that have been removed in that location. Now, within the forestry licences, you're only allowed to actually remove 5 cubic metres every calendar quarter. Now, it's impossible to say exactly when these trees were removed, but there are significant numbers, and I would suspect that there would have potentially have been a requirement for a felling licence to have undertaken that work, potentially. If you look at the 5 cubic metres every quarter, then you're talking, you know, up to 20 cubic metres in a year. But that's not a cubic metre of the woodland floor. Each tree, a mature tree, could be well in excess of 5 cubic metres, because you're talking about the timber itself. Now, from an aerial photograph, it's very difficult to determine exactly how many very large trees there were, but it was well wooded and it was well covered. Does that help?
Chair, can I ask you something right through you, Chair? I'll take your rulings, but I think it's only right that Mr Murray can answer that same question on the same issue. Mr Murray, can you give us your reason?
Councillor Mounsey,
Sorry?
we're not allowed to put questions at this time to the applicant or the agent. We've gone through that stage. It should have been asked then.
But surely, have you not got the right to answer sometime?
No, we've gone through the officers because you've passed that opportunity to ask questions to the applicant or the agent. We're now specifically through to the officers and in debate.
That's the rule, is it?
That's the rule, yeah. Okay, Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing as we're discussing these photographs that's been put in front of us on page 25 of the original report, we're looking at the differences between the photographs from July 22 and June 23. We're making a huge assumption here that these trees were removed. Doncaster Council owns woodland all over the borough, that every time there's a bit of wind, half the trees fall down and we have to spend a lot of money removing them. So there's no evidence that any of the pre-officers can present to us, because we've asked this already, that whether these trees have been felled and removed. We don't know that, you don't know that. There's also, what's really interesting, we're talking about this area around the car park, is all of a sudden it's got this huge big loss of trees. Well, I'm looking just north of Thornhurst Manor, and it seems like a whole new forest has grown there in a year. So I don't know whether that's been mitigated, they're planted because trees have been blown down by the wind. But again, I just think it's more fear being put before us here about these trees. I'm not saying that they haven't cut any trees out, because I know that they've admitted to it. But this area here, I mean, I don't see a significant amount of change. I think there is change, I can see it, I'm not blind. But nobody seems to be able to tell us whether these trees were removed, who removed them, when they removed them, or whether they came down and were removed because they were unsafe, because part of the report's already said there's trees that need to be removed for safety reasons. And the other thing is that I'm a bit concerned about when councillors and council officers are saying that trees need to be removed because members of the public accessing a closed wood. This is never a closed wood, it's open to the public. Anybody can walk in there, even with the landowners, don't need to give permission, it's open. Anybody can walk in there. Okay, so again, every time I look at this, there's something else that's been written against this application that to me personally appears to be fear-mongering. And I do think we're in a situation now, Chair, where we've talked about mitigation. So I'd like to, you know, and you mentioned it as well, there may be more mitigation we can put in here. And I think that's the direction I'm currently going. More mitigation that is financially, obviously, it has to be viable to the applicants to do it. But I think, you know, coming back at this stage of the game, and some of the things I'm reading, when everybody else is supporting this, including Business Doncaster, I think it's unbelievable we even sat talking again about this. So, yeah, I don't know if the tree officers want to say anything about what I've said about the trees.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mouser.
Chair, my little colleague here asked a similar question what I asked, and I was told he couldn't talk about trees. I asked Mr. Murray about the trees. What's fair that what my colleague has asked there is a civil right to me, and I was stopped from asking this young man here to give his own
Councillor
opinion.
Mouser, this is literally within the debate, not to the applicant, what Councillor Stapleton's asking, and which to the officers as well. So this debate session that we're in now is within the officers and the councillors on Planning Committee.
Yeah, I can comment on a couple of those points. So in terms of the risk of trees to members of the public, so this is currently, well, it is private land before the Fear Factory development. The clearing was predominantly used for maintenance of the wider golf course, so it wasn't an area that was where members of the public were encouraged to walk, whereas this is drawing them in to this area. And then because of the development having caused harm to certain trees and damaging them to a point where they need removal, if members of the public weren't walking around this area, then they could be allowed to naturally fall over and contribute towards the kind of biodiversity of the woodland floor. But because there are members of the public, that can't be allowed to happen. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Chair. I hear what you're saying. I think there's a lot of confusion about what is accessible to members of the public. If it's not gated, if it's not got a barrier, any member of the public can walk anywhere they like, even if it's private land. You know, their venue is open, their woodland is open. Therefore, there's just a risk that any member of the public going in there, and you can go in any time they want. Yes, the landowners can come and ask you to leave. At that point, it becomes a civil matter. It's trespass, but it's civil. But you can walk anywhere where anybody can go. And if you, I mean, let's say, for example, one of the places I know where there's regular fall of trees is the woodland in Kirk Sandal at the top of Brex Lane. Every time there's an ounce of wind, half a dozen trees fall down. But as a council, we don't stop members of the public walking through there. We don't block it off. That's a risk that anybody takes walking in woodland. My objection was to the fact that the way it was worded, as if to say, you know, it should be closed. If it's closed off to the public, it's safe, blah, blah, blah. It's never going to be, no woodland's ever going to be safe from trees falling, even if it's managed or not managed.
I'm just going to add, from a planning perspective, we're considering a change of use of the land. And so that does reflect that the way in which this area is going to be used, including by members of the public, is changing, and we need to consider the potential impacts of that. And so, yeah, in terms of the management of the trees, that is something that is affected by the change of the use of the land.
Therefore, the question I'd like to ask is, this is a very difficult one because obviously it's a retrospective where planning permission should have been sought before any action was taken. It provides a facility that the wider community enjoy, whether it's for 19 nights or 10 nights, but the damage has been done. It has impacted on the biodiversity, and I think what we're all trying to ask is, if the committee were minded to grant this application, are there any other mitigation conditions that could be put on to help repair the damage that's been done and to make sure there's no further damage? I've got Councillor Cox and Councillor Stapleton.
I think, as I've stated, I would be minded to grant with the conditions that are on there. Obviously, working with the authority to try and either replenish some of that ground that's there, but we know that the damage is done. However it's been done, we know it's been done. And it is a facility, or however you want to call it, an attraction that does bring people into Doncaster. It does help Doncaster. It does put Doncaster on the map, which is why it's in Business Doncaster and supported by Doncaster Council. So what are we saying here? Are we saying, right, mistakes have been made? Yes, they have. Absolutely. It's been going for 5 years. Is it a success? Well, it would appear to be. Do we need to support development? Not in a housing development. It's not housing development, as some of the NPPF recommendations are, which were 2 days after, came out 2 days after the application was in here. But what are we saying here? Because it works. It has made mistakes. We cannot mend all the mistakes, but what we can do is learn from them now that we know and move that forward and work with the applicant instead of saying, absolutely not, go away. Because I think personally that's wrong in this case. So again, I move that we grant it with the conditions.
Thanks, Councillor. So what I'm hearing from committee members is that there's a lot of support to the application, but I think what the officer has tried to highlight is there are certain mitigation measures that is summarised in the report that goes some way to addressing the harm, but by no means all of the way. And so if members were minded to grant the application, there are things we can do in terms of conditions and Section 106 obligations to mitigate some of the harm. And that can be, if members are minded to grant, that's the securance of conditions and a Section 106 can be delegated to officers and can be dealt with there. But what I think we need to get to and what we need to draw out from you is what are the very special circumstances that you feel exist to overcome the harms to the Greenbelt. This is by definition an appropriate development, and we need those reasons why you think there are very special circumstances which exist, if that is what you are saying, to outweigh the harms caused by this development. And if you're minded to grant, we need some reasons in order to essentially disagree with the planning officer's recommendation.
I've got Councillor Stapleton and Councillor Beach.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always intrigued when we get to this situation where we are mindful of that we may well look to grant permission, and we've been asked to give a reason to justify it, and under the NPPF, because at the end of the day, if we're mindful to do that, who's going to appeal it? Who's going to come and say, hang on, you were wrong for that? Nobody. That's the committee's gift to give or not. So that's one issue. I always struggle with that part of it. Secondly, when it's coming to the mitigation, nobody sort of mentioned about things that could happen quickly. I've read all the things about the mounds of earth put up on the trees, and it potentially within 3 to 5 years could cause damage. Right, so let's get into it now. Get it moved away. That is a mitigation that will preserve those trees that are at risk. And again, part of the mitigation could be that a immediate plan is put into place with, well, it's rag rated or whatever you want to do, but look at the things that could be done immediately to stop any further harm later down the line. And then your 106 and everything else is what damage has been caused now that can't be, I mean, they mentioned about this mound of earth that I think from what else was saying, Martin's saying that there's nothing you could do to mitigate that. There probably isn't, and I'd bow to his knowledge on this one. The damage has been done. But then there's other things that could be done. I mean, these structures are not real buildings. They're basically like a film set. Well, one of the mitigating factors is that, to look at, see if any of them can be moved to a better location within the site that's not going to cause damage. Another mitigation could be no more are allowed to develop. You can't put any more up. You've got a set number of sets. That's it. That's what you've got. No more. So I think there's a lot more mitigation could be put in place that would satisfy the issues we're discussing and the planning applicant and satisfy the applicants as well. And I think that's really the direction I'm leaning towards. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Beach.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'll say that this is in my ward, and I would normally be very supportive of things that are people want in the ward. But in this case, there is no way I can support this. There are so many things wrong with it, besides it being in an area that should not be used for this sort of thing. Those mounds there, if it goes through, I would like to see those moved. All that along the tree line that's been scraped up, that needs removing. And the building with tree growing out of it, at least take the roof off it so the tree's got some water and some oxygen and what have you, so that it doesn't just wither and fade away. But I can't support this because I was a bit nonplussed when I went on site, and it was not what I was expecting. Just far worse. But anyway, I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you for that. These are the last two, because I think we've debated this quite a bit. I've got Councillor Hogarth and Councillor Mounsey.
Yeah, regarding mitigation, I think we have already got mitigation, haven't we? Such as planning laws, which have been ignored. We've got a lot of other laws, which have been ignored. Some people, but additional mitigation. I think there's plenty of mitigation already, which have just totally been ignored.
Councillor Mounsey?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on the page 73, the fallback position. Can officers describe us planning committee members? Because it says there, if the application is refused, planning permission, the wind marquee has the potential to benefit from permitted development rates, Class A, Part 4, Schedule 2 of the Town Country Planning, General Permitted Development Order. And then at 9.18, the Fear Factory development does not benefit from permitted development rights regardless of whether the structures are temporary or not, because it was beach restriction of Part 4, Class B, pertain to the use of land with the buildings curtilage. Could that be explained? I'm concerned about this curtilage. That, if I'm right, the Fear Factory falls in the curtilage of that land, is that correct?
Questions of curtilage, they can be a matter of great debate within planning, but the officer's view is that the Fear Factory element of the development does fall within the curtilage of Thornhurst Manor buildings, and that's for two reasons which are set out in the addendum report, which is firstly that the woodland forms part of the amenity to the manor, and therefore falls within its curtilage, and also that the Fear Factory attraction itself relies upon the car park that most definitely does fall within the curtilage of the buildings, and then so that's why it doesn't benefit from those particular permitted development rights.
Therefore, we've had a couple of suggestions. Councillor Stapleton?
Sorry, Chair, I'm getting confused now. My understanding was that if it falls within the curtilage, which this obviously does, there's no footpath between the development and the building, that if it falls within the curtilage, then it does have permitted development, which is what the applicant was saying. Have I misunderstood this? I mean, I know there's an interpretation about what is curtilage, but to me, if it falls within the curtilage of Thornhurst Manor, that's the permitted development the applicant was talking about.
I'll just find my notes on the actual wording of the legislation.
Yeah, I think Susie will be able to confirm it, but there's a curtilage restriction in the relevant permitted development right.
Yes, to be specific, so it's Class B of Part 4 of the permitted development order. So there's a clause B.1, development is not permitted by Class B if the land in question is a building or is within the curtilage of a building. So that's the restriction.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So we've had a couple of suggestions but no seconders, so therefore I'm going to go first of all. Is there a proposal to refuse planning permission? Okay, that's been moved and seconded by Councillor Peach and Councillor Hogarth. Therefore, can I have a show of hands, those supporting the recommendation? Can you raise your hands now, please? 1, 2, 3. I know I haven't voted. Okay, so that's 3. Those against? And abstentions? I don't believe in a casting vote, to be honest. However, that has been put on, upon me.
I was always under the impression, maybe wrongly, that an abstention was counted as being for the recommendation, that it goes to the chair's casting vote only when there is an even number of votes on the vote.
Councillor Beach, I have heard that previously as well, but we will check that. So if we all bear with us for 5 minutes, we'll double check that.
I'm not sure that is the case, Councillor Beach. An abstention is by definition not voting one way or the other. That's no vote. So in reality, we've got 3 councillors in favour, 3 against. Chair was one of the against, and she has the casting vote, so it's Chair's casting vote that we're on here.
Is there anywhere we can actually check that legally? Because like I say, at previous meetings that I have also been, it's recorded not as an abstention, but it's classed as supporting, so we need to make sure that we need to. Therefore, if with the permission of the committee, shall we just have a 5-minute toilet break just to make sure that we are doing things in a correct and proper manner, that is accurate, and if it is the case, then I will put forward then my casting vote. So it is now 15:07, so at 15:12, so don't go far, people. Thank you.
Chair, can we have an update, please, as to where we are? Because we're sitting here waiting.
Thank you everybody for being so patient. Under Constitution for the Council, the rules state quite clearly if there is an even number of votes for and against, then the Chair will have the casting vote. It does not mention or give any power to anybody who's abstaining to class it either way. So therefore the motion has fallen. So therefore, is there another recommendation?
So I just want to clarify so everybody understands what's happened. So under the council procedure rules, it specifically says if there are an equal number of votes for and against, as there are here, Chair will have a second or casting vote. The abstention from Councillor Liu is neither a vote for or against. So in effect, it doesn't count. There are 3 for and 3 against. So Chair now has to exercise her casting vote, which is
Against the recommendation.
Against the recommendation. So the recommendation to refuse has fallen, and that means we now have to have a new motion, please, members, and reasons and so on. Yeah, and another vote eventually.
Councillor Cox.
I move that we grant them the planning permission with the conditions as stated and all as previous that we said, that I've said before. Then you're going to ask what, are you? All the mitigation stuff that's on that's been put forward that you've said, yep, it can work with that. The working with officers and working with the council. so that everybody works together to make this work. It's not good enough, is it? No. Well, I bow to your legal greatness.
Okay, thank you. I'll give you some direction without putting words into your mouth. What I heard from the debate was members were persuaded in terms of the community participation and the level of tourism and things that you felt it brought into the community and the support it had. Perhaps we could focus on some of those sorts of reasons, which I think are, you know, and then maybe elaborate on why you think that outweighs the harm. In addition to the mitigation measures which you mentioned, why you think that outweighs the harm and why that justifies going against the officer's recommendation, please. Thank you.
I'm always poor at this bit, aren't I? I believe that it does outweigh some of the harm, and I won't say all of it, but the largest majority of it, given that it is a well-used attraction, it is well attended, it's well managed, in my opinion, with fire and everything else being accounted for. Obviously, there's more that needs to be done, which I think everybody's acknowledged. Obviously, I believe that there are young people with additional needs that work there, which is supporting the community. It's supporting the business. Doncaster have decided to get behind it. It's supporting business. It's supporting people getting out and about, maybe into woodland that maybe wouldn't have done previously. So it is, in my opinion, it's an asset that needs to be worked with, and with obviously our learned friends over there. And I like it, and I know that's not a thing. I've never been, and I thought the site visit were absolutely fantastic. I thought, yes, you can see it's something that it needs a bit, but I'm not the person to give that guidance. So, you know, I mean,
I think we also
can't
need
give
to
the
look that there's
conditions
no
'cause I
further
ain't got my
expansion
book.
or removal of any woodlands and trees, etc. You know, without any permission sought as well, because obviously we need them to improve the mitigation to replenish the damage that's been done going forward. But like I say, the community aspect, the business aspect, the tourism is a positive reflection.
And the community involvement.
Yeah,
Is
so
that-
so sorry, I've got a lot of that, which I think, yes, can probably work with that. So I think what we need is a vote on it, but we also just need to include the fact that conditions need to be imposed and a Section 106 agreement needs to be sought should the proposal be granted, and that be delegated to officers to deal with outside of this forum. That's all right.
Yes, you happy? Do we have a second for that motion? Okay. Therefore, can we have a show of hands in favour of the motion? Those against? And abstentions? And therefore, as chair, I support the application. Therefore, my casting vote. Therefore, the application has been successful with the additional conditions. Thank you. Application number 2, 24/01195/3 FULM, erection of 35 affordable dwellings following demolition of existing building at former Adwick Depot, land of the Village Street, Adwick Lee Street in Doncaster, and Andrea Sudders will present this report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with a couple of pre-committee amendments. We've got speakers for this application, We've got Mr Les Ellington. He's requested to speak in opposition to the application. We've got the agent, Richard Mowat. He's speaking in support, with Stephen Hardman from the technical team. He's also present to answer any questions relating to flooding issues. So, looking at the aerial photograph, this gives a good overall view of the site. So the proposal is for 35 dwellings on the former Adwick Depot site and the Fernbank Special School site, and it's on land that's owned by Doncaster Council. The school buildings were demolished in 2022. The remaining buildings are what was the former council depot, plus the historic Dovecote and barn. Historic England have been involved in pre-app discussions on account of the heritage of the buildings on this site, and the resultant scheme has been given much thought and consideration on account of the historic background to the site and the buildings that are on site. The site also lies within the Adwick Street Conservation Area, and looking at the Google image, to the northeast of the site is the Horticultural Learning Centre. This is accessed via an unadopted access road. There's 4 new build houses also to the northeast. These are accessed via Mill Street. And the properties on Farm Court back onto the unadopted access road. The substation that's existing on Village Street, that will remain. There's a number of trees on site, including a central copse. The majority of these will be retained. So the application itself is part of the Council House Build programme, and it will provide 100% affordable housing. These will be taken over by St Ledger Homes to provide social rented accommodation. In policy terms and principle of the residential development, the site's designated as residential policy area within the Doncaster local plan. So it's suitable in principle for residential use, and that's subject to other policy considerations. The applicant did carry out a public consultation, and while some residents raised highway concerns, including lack of parking and speed of vehicles, others were happy to see the site developed because antisocial behaviour problems are common in its current condition. There has been a number of objections received. These are set out in paragraph 6.2 of the officer report, mainly regarding issues including overshadowing, overlooking, parking issues, flooding and loss of the Dovecote. So looking at the site itself, this is the 20th century brick buildings. These are what was used as the former council depot. You can see there's a stone gable on the left. This is the 17th century Dovecote and barn. Local objections being raised on the loss of this Dovecote. In response to this, there was a structural report submitted at pre-application stage, and this assessed the structural condition of the Dovecote building. And in discussions with Historic England, there were a number of options discussed, including retention of this building. However, due to its unsafe and unstable condition, Historic England advised this could be demolished. These are views of the access road at the rear of Farm Court and adjacent the southeast boundary of the site. This side of Farm Court comprises of single-storey bungalows that will back onto the site with 2-storey houses at the bottom of the cul-de-sac. The access road leads to the Horticultural Learning Centre, and the left and middle photos are viewed from Village Street, whilst the right-hand photo is viewed looking into the Horticultural Learning Centre. You can see the site separated from Farm Court by the access road. There's a grass verge buffer planted with mature shrubs behind a limestone boundary wall running along the backs of properties on Farm Court. There has been objection raised regarding overlooking and overshadowing and a loss of light by some residents on Farm Court. In particular, the issue is plot 4 on the proposed layout. Paragraph 8.17 of the recommendation report does provide a detailed response to this, but in summary, there's no loss of amenity given there's a 17 or 18 metre separation distance between the nearest proposed and existing properties. This is the northeastern boundary of the site. Top right is the Horticultural Learning Centre and car parking area for the centre, and the 4 new build houses which are accessed via Mill Street. These photos show the existing car parking. Now, this was formerly used for the school, and I believe this was where the school buses used to park. Local residents now make use of this, and there's been objection raised at the loss of this car parking facility. These car parking spaces fall within the application site boundary. They aren't within the adopted highway. So this means that this is the council's land which they can manage how they wish. So like any other developer, if the council chooses to develop the land, they have a right to do so. So technically, those residents who are currently parking their cars on the land are actually parking illegally on private land. So the council could choose to put a fence up and fence off the car parking, which would be the right to do so. So members of the public would be permanently unable to utilise this as a car parking facility. So this is the site currently. It's cleared and mown where the school buildings were once stood. There's a number of trees on site, including a central copse. The majority will be retained, including the copse that you can see in the centre there. There's been objection on account of loss of wildlife habitat. The council's ecologist has assessed the submitted preliminary ecological appraisal and concurs that the habitats that have been identified on site were typical of an abandoned urban landscape, and there's no mature habitats of medium or high ecological value. There is a pre-commencement condition for a bat method statement. This is given that the existing buildings on site have been identified as having a low risk of a bat roost, so the pre-commencement condition will look at the situation as it stands at the time. This site is also subject to mandatory biodiversity net gain, so 10% net gain will be required via a biodiversity net gain plan, but that will be post-decision. So looking at the site layout itself, the accommodation that's proposed as a result of the housing needs study, which was carried out by the applicant, this identified the size of accommodation requirements in Adwickley Street. There was a high demand for single level accommodation, therefore a need to provide bungalows or other accommodation that doesn't require use of stairs. The application proposes 35 dwellings. This comprises of a mix of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom, 2-storey houses, bungalows and flats with 2 areas of public open space. Of the 35 dwellings, 10 are single storey, that's being bungalows or flats, the remaining 25 being 2, 3, 4-bedroomed houses and 1 5-bedroomed house. This 5-bedroomed being adapted at ground floor for a wheelchair user. The scheme has been subject to informal pre-application advice and public consultation, as I mentioned previously. The council's housing team carried out a public consultation event. Local residents expressed concerns over lack of parking, speed of vehicles coming into the village, and other highway concerns. The positive comments were that a number of residents were pleased to see something happen with the site on account of antisocial behaviour problems that are common in its current condition. On account of the historic buildings on this site and it being within a conservation area, the council's conservation officer and Historic England have had input into the design process from the outset, so at pre-application stage, which has resulted in this current proposed scheme. So the layout itself, as advised and agreed with Historic England, the replacement barns, which are plots 1 and 2, follow the exact footprint, shape and form of the original Dovecotton barn. There's a collection of 5 new bungalows designed in a stable yard layout. These are located on the eastern corner of the site, and will back onto the Horticultural Learning Centre and Mill Farm Court to the southeast. There's a pair of semi-detached bungalows. These are located on the northern border and nearest to the 4 new no-build properties. The orientation of these bungalows has been given due consideration of the existing properties and orientated with a side elevation facing those existing, as opposed to turning their backs. In terms of materials, the principal roof materials are man-made alternative slate, red brick, render on the staple block. Limestone boundary walls are an important and an extensive feature of the conservation area, so these have been incorporated into the scheme. So overall, the proposed scheme will not adversely impact the character or appearance of the conservation area. In terms of parking and access arrangements on the site, all properties will be accessed via either the 2 main points of vehicular access from Village Street or Mill Lane. Individual parking spaces have been allocated within some plots, whereas the stables development and the barns and cottages include parking courts. The South Yorkshire Police Design and Out Crime Officer, he has raised concerns over the lack of surveillance for some car parking spaces, but there will be natural surveillance provided by overlooking windows of adjacent or nearby properties. In terms of objections, there's been objection received raising concerns regarding the proximity of Plot 4 to Farm Court, which I mentioned previously, and the impact on residential amenity, parking, and the potential for antisocial behaviour. There's no loss of amenity for any residents. The scheme meets local plan policies with respect to separation distances, therefore raising no amenity issues of overlooking or loss of light. The orientation of the site doesn't result in any overshadowing to existing properties. The scheme provides off-street car parking for each dwelling and visitor parking. Any issues of antisocial behaviour will be addressed via other legislation, but overall the application is in full accordance with local plan policies 42 and 44 in terms of design, layout, access and highway requirements. The Urban Design Officer is supportive of the design and layout of the scheme. The Conservation Officer and Historic England are also content and satisfied with the proposal, causing no detriment to the character or appearance of the conservation area. Therefore, it's fully compliant with Conservation Local Plan Policy 37. In terms of the open space, there's 2 separate areas. There's one more traditionally laid out in the form of the village green, positioned in the southeastern corner, and that is just a visualisation of that open space. This has been designed for use for all of the residents and to incorporate as many of the existing trees as possible. So the green is framed and overlooked by surrounding properties. Secondly, a less traditional area of open space in the form of the central copse. This is located north of the stable block in the more or less the centre of the site. The copse will have seating and it will have a level paved footpath network which connects to the nearby dwellings. This has been specially designed for the more mature or older residents. The scheme provides the full 15% on-site public open space requirement. The site does lie predominantly within Flood Zone 2 and there is a small part within Flood Zone 1. Flooding has been raised by objectors as a major issue of concern. This is on account that the area has flooded. The council's drainage officers are aware of the situation and on account of this requested bespoke modelling. This was to demonstrate that the proposed flood mitigation, which is to raise land levels, wouldn't disperse surface water onto the surrounding properties during a flood event. Following submission of the bespoke modelling, officers are satisfied with the modelling subject to drainage conditions for management and maintenance of the system. This is a street scene slide that shows the proposed street scenes with existing properties and the proposed with the raise in finished floor levels. The raise in floor levels won't negatively impact on the existing properties. You can see street scene A and B. That's predominant where the finished floor levels will be raised. So we're looking at about 300 millimetres raise in finished floor levels. Moving on to house types. This slide shows a 3-bedroom, 5-person semi-detached house. This has been identified in the Housing Needs Survey. External materials will be red-facing brick, imitation slate roof tiles, and render will be used on some of the properties. All properties will have solar panels and air source heat pumps. This slide shows the pair of barns. These will replicate the scale and form of the dovecot. These are 3-bed, 5-bedroomed 3-bed, 5-person semi-detached houses. The materials are, as I've already mentioned, red brick with imitation slate roof, but these will also include artstone headers and sills. And this slide shows the stable block dwellings in the northeast corner of the site. These are 2-bed, 3-person, single-level houses. External materials for these will be white render, anthracite windows and imitation slate roof tiles. The majority of the properties meet nationally described internal space standards. The scheme does fall short with 2 units due to the site's constraints. That's on account of the existing trees, the existing substation, but primarily on account of the heritage requirements. So officers have taken the view that on balance, given the heritage constraints of this site, the greater community benefit will be to provide much needed social housing in this area. This slide shows a proposed visual, and this is viewed from Mill Street. Choice of materials, this has been an important consideration. This is on account that the development will remain in the authority's ownership, so therefore it needs to be resilient. As I've already mentioned, proposed materials will be red-facing brick, cement imitation slate roof tiles, and the use of render to some properties. And this is another visual. This is viewed from the corner of Mill Street and Village Street. Properties have been designed to reduce their impact on the environment and to make the homes more sustainable. These comprise of air source heat pumps, solar panels, and EV charging points. EV charging points are now a requirement of building regulations, which you're probably already aware of. You can see that there's the use of limestone boundary walls. This is characteristic of the Adwick Conservation Area. The use of artstone headers and sills. There's been a lot of thought and consideration given to the overall design and layout of the scheme. This is to respect the historic buildings and the heritage of the site. Historic England and the Conservation Officer are content with the overall design, layout and proposed materials. Officers consider that the development will preserve and enhance the character of the conservation area. In terms of Section 106 legal contributions, this scheme does provide the full public open space requirement. This is all provided on site, so the requirement is 15%. It does fall short of providing other contributions. Education, for example, there's 5 secondary school places required at Outwood Academy. These total £123,805 as a financial contribution. SIMCA, or South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, has requested a contribution for public transport improvements. This includes providing the costs for the supply and installation of a replacement bus shelter. That's at a cost of £10,000. And then there's the costs of one wayfaring sign at the junction of Village Street and Church Lane, and another one at the junction of Church Lane and Doncaster Lane. This application is a balance of considerations. It's a council house build scheme. It's reliant on grant funding. There's no further grant funding available for the scheme, therefore it can't sustain any Section 106 contributions and wouldn't be viable were the contributions required. So officers consider that given these factors, there would be greater community benefit in assisting the delivery of affordable homes by granting permission without any commuted sums. Therefore, on balance, the officer recommendation is for approval of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Andrea. We've got Mr Les Ellington, a member of the public who has requested to speak in opposition of the application. If you'd like to come down to the front, please. Well, they've got a little white sign, it says speakers. That's it, thank you. It's now your opportunity to speak to the committee for up to 5 minutes. So when you're ready, press the large red button that'll record what you're saying, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name, as I said, Les Ellington. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the residents of Farm Court to the application site and to highlight some of their concerns, which have been raised by the residents, both verbally and in writing to the planning office. I'd like to just point out, first of all, I'm led to believe that the site is incorrectly named. All the time it's been called the former Adwick Depot land. It's only part of it. The first time it's been mentioned is today, that it was actually the Fern Special School also land, and that has never been mentioned in anything, and it should have been. It has caused some uncertainty, and people have not been quite sure what it was that you were going to apply for, first of all. Because originally it was, I believe locally, it was understood that only the depot land was to be developed, not where the school was, that this area was to be left open for whatever reason. So there was obviously some misunderstanding from the start as to what was intended for the development. And why was no further consultation arranged? As looking at the final application, very little has changed. And why were we not given the courtesy of a planning application notice? My neighbour had a planning application at the same time that this came in. I received a notice about his little extension, not a word about this one. So, the time that the notices went up on the front of the site, and everybody, nobody saw them for a week because of where they were. They're very tiny notices, and every time you get a notice put on there, somebody tears it down. But that's all to do with the antisocial behaviour. But anyway, the point was that we didn't know about it, and it could also, you probably would have had more objections to it for various reasons, had people been given the time and the courtesy of that notice. At the rear of the site, you've mentioned about the continuance of the horticultural centre called Smile. We're just concerned there is that this was in the past subject to antisocial behaviour. There's nothing mentioned on here, I know it's off the application site, but what's intended with regards to its security? There's a gate on there which is right in the middle of the proposed village green to protect this site. And it's all got very high mesh wire all the way up the lane. Now we're going to replace it with nothing, really, at that side. I just wondered what was going to happen with that, because obviously it's going to be wide open. I know you call it a road along the side there, but it's single track lane, it's not a road. Yeah, we understand obviously why the council are looking to develop this site. I mean, it's a very nice site in a very nice part of Doncaster Borough. And we welcome it in a sense, yes, very much welcome it. But we welcome it with conditions, and a lot of these have been voiced, and we hope that you will be able to look at them in due course as we go through them. The on-site parking, for instance, we think the site itself is over-intensively being developed. You're squeezing as much as you can, you've got to keep the trees, or you're trying to. It's very pretty, that's fine. But the parking is of major concern. The residents are being accused of being
1 minute remaining.
How many?
1 minute.
Poof, blimey. On a major application like this, it's not quite long enough. However, the siting, it's over-intensified because of the parking. You've got 35 houses, you've got 40 plus spaces. Where's all the rest of the cars going to go? We already have problems with all of this. People are parking there, you know, they go to the church, the public house, attending the football, the cricket, the bowls matches, and the park in general. You've got a lot of people using it. The village green, very nice on the plans and the artistic impression, but is it really needed? No, I don't think so. It's one of those box ticking exercises where it's just going to be a rubbish dump, and that's after the local youths have finished swinging through the trees. But we shall see. It looks very nice, but I would have thought that you could have used it for something more appropriate. The large 5-bedroomed house that we're talking about, which has not been mentioned really, is right on the side of the lane, and I would like you, if you wouldn't mind, to bring that slide back up. This one here. No, this one, please.
Right.
The one after that.
That's your 5 minutes up now, Mr. Ellington.
That's the one.
Thank you very much.
That's the one.
If
Can
you
I
press-
just point out,
I'm
on the
sorry,
second
no,
line
you're allowed,
down,
Mr. Ellington, you're allowed 5 minutes and that's all we're allowed. But we will now go over to the councillors on the committee that can ask you questions.
please ask me a question on that.
So if you just press your red microphone, the red button for your microphone for me, please. Thank you. Therefore, would any of the councillors like to ask any questions? Councillor John Mounsey.
Thank you, Chair. I believe your name is Mr. Harrison, sir. Is that right? Is it Mr. Harrison? Mr. Ellington. Ellington, sorry, Mr. Ellington.
Mr. Ellington, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I've lived down there since 1970. I, like Mr. Ellington, welcome the fact that we're going to get to social housing in our ward of Adwick, especially on Village Street. And like Mr. Ellington says there, it's a nice place to have a property out there, but you raise the issues that a lot of people come to me about. It's the parking on the front there, was been there for, well, as long as the school was there before. It is access, really, to the facilities that were the depot, but also to the local pub, the Foresters Arms. And it's always been there for years, but I'm not sure, Chair, whether we can say that there is any rights because of the time it's been there. That I'm not sure there is, but the council...
Councillor Mounsey, this is where you're addressing your questions to Mr. Ellington.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Yeah.
I've looked at the planet as well up there. Well, look there. It's like I said, yeah, I want this with open arms, but the thing here is that Mr. Ellington is speaking what the residents have said, and I listen to my residents when they speak. They're not objecting to it in any way, shape. They both want it. But what they're telling you is there are things there that need addressing, and conditions put on this by the people, what they want, to make sure it goes with satisfactory to the people. It's a local plan for local people, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Mounsey, what is your question to Mr. Ellington?
Sorry, Mr. Ellington, I just hope that was my question there, and I hope you agree with me. That's my question. That's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm doing, okay?
Thank you for that. It's very much needed, is the parking, whether it's there or somewhere else, but it is needed.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Ellington, for your time. We've now got a Mr. Richard Mowat, the agent for the applicant, who has requested to speak in support of the application. Would you like to come down to the front, please? And again, this is now your opportunity to speak to the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large... Right, Mr. Ellington, would you... thank you very much. There's another gentleman coming down. Thank you. So this is your time to be able to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. When you're ready, press the large red button. And again, when you've finished that, I'll mute the microphone and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Chair, members of the committee, the opportunity to present and formally support these proposals is very much welcomed. I'm supported by Mr Stephen Hardman, who is an Associate Engineer for BSP Consulting and is available to answer any questions you may have on flooding or drainage. These proposals will deliver 35 much-needed affordable dwellings in Adwick the Street. The proposal will deliver a mixture of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom, 2-storey houses, bungalows and flats for social rent, and importantly a village green on land owned by the council. The application site falls within the residential policy area as designated by the local plan and is therefore a sustainable location for the development of additional affordable homes. The dwellings are to be constructed as part of the council's new council house build programme, which aims to deliver new council housing across the borough Once built, the site is transferred to St Ledger Homes, who will manage the housing on behalf of the council. As you'll be aware, the National Planning Policy Framework and the new Labour government both attach substantial weight to the value of using suitable brownfield land within settlements for homes and other identified needs. There are no outstanding consultee objections to the scheme, which in part is born out of a comprehensive pre-application process and continued dialogue with the key consultees such as the Conservation Officer, the Interim Drainage Team, Historic England, West Yorkshire Archaeological Services, the Conservation Officer and importantly the Urban Design Officer. Indeed, discussions with the latter have ensured the layout, materials and final design all complement the surrounding street scene, provide attractive areas of public space, supported by the retention of existing trees, and delivers the requisite number of parking spaces to ensure all parking arising from the development is managed appropriately. Discussions with the West Yorkshire Archaeological Service conclude that it will be necessary to submit a written scheme of investigation which sets out a programme and suitable methods of site investigation and recording. This requirement is clearly set out in Condition 4. Turning to drainage and following additional modelling, we now have a scheme that's supported by Internal Drainage and the Environment Agency. The scheme has been designed to protect the visual and residential amenity of neighbouring properties. The scheme has been designed to protect the visual and residential amenity of neighbouring properties. Accordingly, members of the general public can rest assured that any perceived visual or residential impacts are negligible. The plot referred to by our earlier speaker is located to the north of Farm Court. By virtue of the sun's orientation, i.e. rising in the east and setting in the west, this plot will not cast a shadow over the rear gardens of properties on Farm Court. Notwithstanding this position, plans were revised during the course of the application to include a hip roof which removed the need for a brick gable. Separation distances of between 17.5 metres and 18.4 metres have been provided between number 5 and number 7 Farm Court and plot 4. A distance which is broken up by existing landscape planting, an access road and a 1.8 metre high fence, the latter of which will completely screen views from single-storey ground floor window. Further, the proposed first floor side window serves a bathroom only and is obscurely glazed. The principle developing this site is clearly acceptable. Further, the delivery of affordable homes must attract substantial weight. The site constraints have been assessed and there are no significant adverse economic, environmental or social harms that would significantly or demonstrably outweigh any benefits identified when considered against the policies and the National Planning Policy Framework taken as a whole. Accordingly, this application should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, it's a two-part. What do you think the reason for the minimum space standards are?
In terms of the National Described Minimum Space Standards?
Just why? Because you're not meeting them on this project. And I think for the council to want to build houses that don't meet this minimum standard, it's a minimum standard. And by building houses smaller than the minimum, are we getting in a situation where we're building the sons of the future?
I think from the report and the presentation earlier, I think in terms of the actual houses, they all meet National Described Space Standards in terms of their living accommodation. I believe there's just two. The shortfall is around 2 of the parking spaces, I believe, where there's a shortfall in terms of the width of the parking spaces. That's the only shortfall across the site. So in terms of the actual dwellings, they all meet the National Described Space Standards.
Councillor Stapleton, then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Really quick one, actually. The dovecot that's planned on being demolished, I remember the very first time I sat in this chamber in planning, I took great exception to the fact that a tree that belonged to the council suddenly vanished, which probably was the developer's method of payment. Given the fact that the masonry and the timber from 500-year-old building is going to be quite valuable, I'd hate to see that as part of payment or taken away or given to someone. Is there any way we can incorporate that into the site itself? At least, you know, if you're making a gate out of some decent timber, you've got it there. And again, the boundary walls, could they be made from the material from the dovecot? So at least some of it staying there. Or if you can't use the timber, at least offer it to some of the community groups and schools in the area that may have a use for it. It's
a good question. I suppose it's. I mean, it's something that could be. I suppose could be considered in terms of is there opportunities to recycle some of the material. I'm not sure it's something that's been discussed, to be honest, but it could be something that could be conditioned or looked at moving forward.
If I may, in principle, I've got no objection to this at all. Apart from that one thing, that I do think that the dovecot should be. I get it. It can't be saved, but the materials could be saved. I'd hate to think that there's people working on this project and end up with a nice rockery in their back garden. It's courtesy of Doncaster Council. It belongs to the people. It should stay with the people. Thank you.
I think just to pick up on that point, Councillor Stapleton, if I can, what we could do is attach an informative to any permission, strongly encouraging the applicant to explore all of those opportunities for incorporating those materials.
I'm sure in the report it does actually mention that the stone from the dovecot is actually going to be used for the boundary walls, but I might be mistaken, but that was always the intention, I understand.
Thank you for that.
So if I could just add to that, so the person I needed to attract the attention was sat right behind me, but in terms of the timber, it's our understanding that the timber's is completely rotten and probably is unrecoverable. In terms of the walls, I think it's an oversight on my behalf. I think that there is an intention to actually incorporate some of that within the walls. It's in the report, but it's yeah. So I think there is an intention to work with some of the materials that we've got. So
yeah, thanks for that. I didn't expect we'd do anything else, but I think it was important, given the issue I had with the tree the first time I sat here, that it's something at least get it on record so we know where we're at. Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to know what's happened. How is the surface water going to be managed?
So there's a full sustainable drainage design proposed. The majority of the surface water will be infiltrated to ground in permeable parking courts with storage beneath, apart from the road, which due to adoption standards will have an attenuation tank with a restricted flow out to Mill Lane. So it'll all be restricted back to Greenfield rate, which is the Greenfield equivalent and actually a considerable betterment over the previous scheme, which is now demolished.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Cox? Are you happy with that, or have you got a supplementary?
What are you still looking at 1 in 100 years events, or have you, right, you are still looking at 1 in 100 years?
Yeah, so there's storage for 1 in 100 years plus 40% climate change with an allowance for 10% urban creep on top of that, and that will all be stored on site.
Oh, cool. Sorry.
Okay. Are there any other councillors that wish to ask? Councillor Mounsey.
Most of the residents talked to me when the plans come out where you could see them, asked me about, especially the residents on Farm Court. When you look at the building there, them grey are the bungalows on Farm Court. And what we were told in the first instance was they would be a 3-storey or a 5-storey, 3-storey house there, which would overlook. What I'm asking for, can you now give us assurances that those bungalows on Farm Court will not be overlooked by any building put near them?
yeah, so as I alluded to in my statement, the property that you're discussing that sort of sits to the north of Farm Court, there's 2 windows in that elevation. One is at a ground floor level, which is screened by the fencing that will run along the access road in between Farm Court and the site. And the first floor window is going to be a bathroom window, which is obscurely glazed. And as I alluded to in the report, the design of that property, it's now got a hip roof on it, so that the actual you've taken the gable away, which obviously reduces the perception of height. So they're the measures that were put in place to ensure that there's no impact, and also in terms of the orientation of the sun rising in the east, moving round to the west and setting in the west. There's no way the property can actually overshadow those properties by virtue of it being to the north of them. So it's our view that along with the requisite distances between rear elevations and the side elevation, the existing boundary treatment to the road, some new boundary treatment, and the way that the property is designed and its orientation, we're now satisfied that there's no impact whatsoever on neighbouring amenity.
Chair, if I can, Chair, are you giving me assurance what you just said there, that there will be nothing, no building overlooking them bungalows on Farm Court?
Yes.
Like, the next question, Chair, if I ask you, Chair, is that when you look here at the road structure going in there, and the plan up there has it all, you can see it all. Mill Lane and Village Street, when you see that plan come up, please, it's right on the junction. And that house, as you come on the corner there, Village Street, where the dove cut is just up from there, we've got some more properties there, but I've never known properties be there, because the shops seem farther down from the corner of that Village Street and Mill Lane.
Apologies, I'm struggling to. I'm
struggling to.
Councillor Mounsey, can you actually direct a question? So
it's I don't know whether it's just the proximity of the microphone. I'm just struggling to pick up what the question was. Apologies.
It's just maybe my voice, kid. On Village Street, as you come, this is the question. And you get to the bend there, on the Village Street, that first one there is Mill Lane, or the old Mill Lane. You turn onto there, there's a set of houses on there that's never been there before. They come down to where the shops are, and the shops seem farther down on Mill Lane. There are 2-3 shops on Mill Lane, but there's houses there now to where before you get to the shops.
So, yeah, I just was that a question. I know this. Yeah, I know. I appreciate there's houses on to the north of Mill Lane, and we've picked if it's a amenity point, we've picked that up in the committee report as well in terms of addressing the distance between new and existing dwellings.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, now, members, we're going to go into debate. Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, as you're aware, I may have to leave very quick. I should have gone 5 minutes ago. One of the things I wanted to ask Andrea, and it's something that I feel quite passionate about, we're in a public meeting right now where people are going to see what's been said and hear what's been said. And it's been stated by Doncaster Council that parking down there is illegal. There's no signage. There's nothing down there. I think potentially us using language like that could cause an issue amongst the neighbours. You're parking illegal, I'm going to get onto the council, blah, blah, blah. Nobody's parking illegal on there. There's no signage. They've not been asked to move. I get it, they're trespassing, but until you ask them to move, they're not committing an offence, and even then it would be civil. So I think we need to be mindful of using words like illegal, because it isn't illegal. That's really all I want to say. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stapleton. Councillor Beach.
Yes, could I just ask the officer to reiterate the 5-bedroom house that you said it was for a specific use? Could you just... And you said it was for a specific use? I mean, disabled or something?
It will be adapted, yeah, for a wheelchair user. Yeah.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you. I think overall I welcome this proposal, but what does cause me concern, and maybe something that we don't need to slip into, is that we can see that there is education need within the area. It states in the report of 5 places required, and there's no funding to give to supply those 5 places. it is a requirement of the authority to make sure that the education provision is there. How are we going to ensure that this application isn't setting a benchmark for other applicants to come forward and say, well, they haven't done it because they've said if we do, we can't afford, which is what we've heard previously. How are we going to make sure that we've got those school places for that are much needed?
This all comes down to viability and the question of viability of a scheme. The National Planning Policy does allow for viability to be taken into consideration, and that's where the balance of considerations comes into effect. So on the one hand, you have the viability of the scheme. It isn't viable, it cannot provide the Section 106 obligations, all of them, but yet it will be providing very much needed social housing in this area. So that's where, members of Planning Committee, that's where your decision comes in as to weigh up that balance of considerations. Is the greater benefit in providing those affordable homes for the local community, or insisting on providing the Section 106 contributions, in this case the education?
It does cause me concern because, yes, we're weighing it up, but we know there's a need for both. There's a need for education, yet we seem to debate quite a lot about a tree. We have a lot of conversations about a tree, and it seems that our young people are left behind. sorry, Mum, I'm getting done. But it frustrates me. I understand the need. It frustrates me, as it has for a long time, regarding surface water that I have mentioned a couple of times apparently before, and waste drainage. So we are adding to a problem in developing without an end process, if you like, without making sure that the infrastructure for education, for waste, for surface water is adequate to cope with the development. And yes, it's a balance, but I think that we as an authority should be setting more of a precedent in saying, yes, we can do this, and tick both boxes at the same time. It might be that if we can look at, we might lose one property, but we can gain school places, or we can ensure that the surface water and drainage works. But that is obviously to greater minds than me. But I just would like to know how that can be worked into plans moving forward.
Well, the fact is we're presented with the application before us, the application's for 35 dwellings, and it's down to the applicant as to whether they want to amend the number of dwellings being applied for. Yes, we could put your point across, they could reduce it, but from the applicant's point of view, they want to provide as much housing as they possibly can. So as a planning authority, our duty is to consider that application and the planning merits of the application. And in this case, it comes down to the viability issue. It's reliant on grant funding, and there's no other means of funding this scheme other than grant funding. So there's no monies available. So therefore, it comes down to weighing up that balance, and it's one against the other. I know what you're saying, but these are the planning considerations. That's all we can consider.
Just to come in on that as well, I think perversely, if we were looking for the scheme to provide other contributions, you'd probably be looking at a larger number of units and therefore other impacts arising potentially to neighbours and to trees, and the amount of public open space we'd be able to provide. I think more broadly, outside of the determination of this application, the conversation with colleagues in education needs to continue about how we do that more widely. Chair, I don't know if Andrea wants to come back on the point that Councillor Stapleton made about parking before he left, or whether or not we've moved on from that.
Yeah, I'd just like to respond to Councillor Stapleton making the comment about using the word illegal. It was a case of not trying to make a point. It was saying technically it is illegal parking. It wasn't being blatant about the issue of there is illegal parking. It was just laying out the facts, and the facts are that this isn't adopted highway, so there is no right to park. And if this was any other private developer, they could erect a fence and that would prevent any parking there from members of the public. But as things stand at the moment, technically, and I use the word technically in my report, it is illegal parking, if you want to call it that. So it wasn't making a massive issue. It was just trying to make a point that it's really council-owned land and there is no right to park there. So I just wanted to make that point and clarify.
Thank you for that. Councillor Beat.
Right. It's actually on the same subject as Councillor Cox, and I'd highlighted it at home. I want to know how, whatever the sum is, which is 24,000 plus, how you, per place, how you can provide 5 places. That's not a classroom. It's not even a porter cabin. I mean, to put 5 places on a school, I should have thought was an impossibility, unless you can, you know, pinch a bit of the hall and incorporate it into a classroom or something like that. I realise that this is some complicated formula that has to be gone through, like viability. So, you know, I don't know whether you can answer it, but how can you give 5 places? I mean, you know, where?
To be quite honest, I find the calculation that education use a bit of a dark art. They've stated there's 5 places required, but this comes on current need. So they take into account the developments within the area and how many school places will be taken. I can't really talk. I can't give you any further information because I just don't know how they calculate it.
I think we need a training session.
Councillor Beach, would you like to question? And thank you. Do we have any other questions to the officer? Councillor Mousey?
Thank you, Chair. Steve hit on a valid point, and I said it the same, but I'm not sure if I'm going to declare a conflict of interest here, because I'm the vice chair, and I was the chair. It dealt with Academy for many, I've been 36 years ago there, right? But what happened now, when you look at the development that's taking place, very neat, that's what we call the bird estate, Chester Avenue, etc., right? There was no problem there with getting them kids to go to school, and there was never any 106 money, because they left us with a big green for people to access on the site itself. But there's still no problem. Most of the kids from there that go to our academy walk up the road into the school gate at the top. I don't think it's a problem on this one, but Steve's right to raise it. But having said that, I want to know now that these students can walk up there quite safely, and it won't do any harm to walk to school instead of getting dropped off at the school gates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. If you believe you need to fill in a conflict of interest form, then I suggest you ask for one, but I don't think that will be a conflict.
Sorry, can we just clarify what it is you think is a conflict of interest? Sorry, I didn't get some of that, Councillor.
As well as being the councillor, I spoke in Carcroft, and I'm proud to be that. I've also been a governor at that school since there was Doncaster Technology College and now the Academy. I've been there this will be 36th year, yeah. So I just wondered, it was Steve made the point, do they declare a conflict of interest by being a school governor at that school?
Oh, I see. You're a school governor at the school concerned
Yes.
where the money would be going if
Yes.
it was achieved.
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I'm just clarifying because
I would say not, because you're not specifying any school in this report, are you? You're just saying that it would possibly need 5 spaces. I don't think it's... feel free to declare if you feel safer doing so, but I wouldn't say you need to declare an interest based on that, because it's not sort of specifically referring to any school, is it?
Is it Outward Academy where you're a governor? Yeah. I wouldn't say it is a conflict. I think I would agree with Sarah. I think there is no money going there if that's what members agree to today. So no, I wouldn't suggest it was. I think, but feel free to fill out a conflict of interest form if you want to. But I wouldn't say it has any bearing particularly.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions? Therefore, is there a mover to grant planning permission subject to conditions? That's moved. Do we have it seconded? Yeah. Show of hands in favour. Therefore, planning permission is agreed. Thank you for that. Application number 3 is 24/00808 FUL, which is erection of 5 dwellings and associated garages following the demolition of existing farmhouse, barn and outbuilding at Brookhouse Farm, Church Street in Armthorpe, and the planning case officer is Dave Richardson, who will introduce this item. Councillor Hogarth. Apologies for the delay, please bear with us. Thank you for your patience. We're just organising for somebody to read the literature that Councillor Tim Needham has left with us. So, Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Just turning to pre-committee amendments, we have Mr. Lee Stoddard, a member of the public, registered to speak in opposition. We've got Miss Christine Broadhurst-Brown on behalf of Armthorpe Parish Council, also in support, in opposition. Some supporting photos have been submitted for both these speakers, which I'll bring up as part of their presentations. Councillor Needham has requested to speak in opposition. I understand he's not here and has submitted a written letter of representation. And then Mr. Ian Barrowclough, the planning agent, will speak in support of the application on behalf of the applicant. Other amendments, the proposal includes a condition for an archaeological written scheme of investigation. These are to ensure any remains are identified and recorded. And we've also received additional representation from Mrs. Margaret Adamson, reiterating concerns that she has raised previously on the application. And I believe they are summarised already on the pre-committee amendments in terms of overlooking loss and privacy, noise and pollution, traffic and access, drainage and traffic congestion, which I'll cover off in the report. The site itself is within Armthorpe's built-up area. It's surrounded by a mixture of residential styles. The site includes a abandoned farmhouse, outbuildings, and a later addition, a large barn. You see that in the top left of the application site there. These assets are, well, these buildings are suggested to detract from the setting of St Leonard's and St Mary's Church, which is Grade 2 listed to the north there. Barton Lane to the south is fronted by 3 detached dwellings. To the west is a substantial bungalow with rooms in the roof, which separates the application site from the graveyard that sort of wraps around to the west. Properties on Church Street include a pair of post-war semi-detached houses that have been heavily extended, and the property known as the Gables. The Gables is that property to the left-hand side there, and this is the highway Lichgate. It's adopted. The road is approximately 4.8 metres wide, which exceeds the width required in the residential design guide to allow 2 cars to pass one another. It also has footpaths either side of the road, as you can see, extending to the entrance to the application site in the distance with the green gate, and the entrance into the church grounds to the right. These are the key considerations covered off in the committee report. Essentially, the proposal seeks to redevelop the site with 5 dwellings, 2 of which, plots 1 and 2, are single-storey bungalows, and 3 two-storey houses, plots 3, 4 and 5. I think it's important just to highlight that this isn't the same application that was previously refused by the planning authority. The reasons for refusal are summarised here. Essentially, in response, the number of dwellings on this application is now being cut from 6 to 5. This allows the site to breathe, increase the separation distances to be in accordance with the council's recommended guidance. The heritage impact has been minimised, so the closest dwellings to the church, as I mentioned, are now bungalows. These have reduced mass, obviously, and respect the mature trees that are beyond the northern boundary, and respecting the root protection areas of those trees. As part of this application, there's the retention of a 2.5 metre barn wall and existing walls along the northern edge, separating the graveyard from the application site. The previously unsuitable access via Barton Lane has been replaced by a sole access of Lichgate, with improvements including a turning head, footways and speed restraint measure. And then, as I mentioned, the revised layout ensures retained trees are outside the sort of development footprints of the properties, and there's also additional planting proposed, which was a previous reason for refusal as well. So in short, as I've highlighted here, this is a significant departure from a previously refused scheme. The proposal has attracted significant public interest, including 36 objections and a petition signed by 178 individuals. The main aspects of the representations I've just summarised in this slide here. These are important issues that officers have fully considered in the report that's in front of you. In terms of highway safety, the current situation on Lichgate is problematic. As you may know, there's a lack of turning facility, and that leads to multiple cars reversing potentially onto Church Street as a result of inappropriate parking on Lichgate itself. These issues are not created by the proposed development. The development, as you can see here, will formalise vehicle access into the site but create a cul-de-sac with a turning head. This will allow vehicles, including refuse lorries, emergency vehicles and other services associated with the church, to enter and exit the site in forward gear. This is a significant improvement over the existing dead-end arrangement, making it safer for all users. The access from Lichgate to Church Street has acceptable levels of visibility. The proximity of the bus stop, and I've just included a Google image here on the right-hand side, you can see the bus stop, is noted, but drivers can proceed with due care and attention. The highway officer has reviewed the plans and has raised no objections. The development itself only consists, I say only, but it's 5 dwellings, which will generate a limited amount of additional vehicle traffic. This minimal increase is not considered to significantly impact traffic flow. The proposal therefore is considered to improve highway safety and provide sufficient levels of parking for the new users of the site. In terms of respecting the church, its setting, clearly very important. As I mentioned, the number of dwellings has been reduced to 5. Plots 1 and 2 redesigned as single-storey bungalows. This obviously reduces the bulk massing from the perspective of the church, making it less imposing, more sympathetic. The more substantial 2-storey dwellings to the south of the site are positioned behind existing substantial 2-storey properties. In terms of the northern boundary, a 2.5 metre section of the existing barn will be retained as a boundary feature. I've just tried to illustrate this here. This will provide a physical barrier and maintain a degree of separation between the development and the churchyard. Additionally, walls to the churchyard toilet block, so that's more to the left-hand side, they will be retained and conditions imposed to ensure the suitable or making good of them, if you like, through planning conditions, making sure they're capped, and any sort of works around them respect the location. A construction method statement will be required to ensure that the construction activities within the site themselves do not disturb graves and to respect the sensitive nature of the location. Conservation officers raised no objections to the amended proposals, noting that the impact on the significance and setting of the church has been greatly reduced compared to the earlier proposal. The officer also notes that most of the existing buildings detract from the current setting of the church. So I'll just go through these photos here. You can see that's the large barn where a 2.5 section of the wall, section of the wall will be retained. This, as I mentioned at the start of the presentations, this is where I've spanned round to the sort of wider graveyard site to the west, and that's an intervening property in the foreground behind that hedge, and you can see that barn in the middle distance behind it. That's a nice photo of the church itself, and I thought I'd just show that there's other infill development on the north side of the church, as you can see here, under construction after being granted planning permission a few years ago. In terms of density, overlooking and privacy concerns, there's been a reduction in properties to 5, and that allows the site to breathe. This allows the separation distances to be respected, and I've just illustrated a few of these here, meeting council guidance. The proposed layout will not result in a degree of unacceptable overlooking. Properties are designed to have good standards of internal, external amenity space and will meet nationally described space standards. In terms of other matters, there are trees to the northern part of the site. These will be protected through a tree protection scheme which is conditioned before development begins. There will be opportunities to incorporate new trees as well, including 3 new street trees. In terms of contamination, a land assessment and remedial strategy will also be conditioned. If unexpected contamination is found, all works will stop and the authority is notified, with further remediation and verification required. In terms of drainage, soakaways are proposed for each plot, with details to be provided by a condition requiring soakaway tests. Foul water will connect to an existing connection in the highway, as agreed with Yorkshire Water. I've mentioned archaeology from Chair's briefing. I've just included a couple of historic images there that sort of detail that the site itself has been largely agricultural in history. But despite this being low risk, a WSI written scheme investigation is also conditioned to ensure that any fines are recorded and assessed before development commences. And then finally, noting the construction phase through objectives as well, they've mentioned that we should be respecting the integrity of the graveyard. A detailed method statement, as I mentioned, for the construction of the boundary walls is imposed. and a method statement for the works overall. This will include protocols for ensuring noisy activities are carried out when the services and other events are not taking place. So in conclusions, the proposal will deliver sustainable use of land. It will provide housing in a sustainable location. The application has overcome the previous reasons for refusal, as well as the objections raised. The design will ensure that it integrates well with the character of the area and protects the setting of the church. And it's important, I think it's important to mention, it should be judged on its own merits, including the improvements to the existing highway layout. And on that basis, it's recommended to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We've got a Miss Stothard, a member of the public who has requested to speak in opposition to the application, as well as Miss Adamson and Mr Barber. You've been advised that you can have up to 5 minutes between you. This is now your opportunity to address the committee collectively for up to 5 minutes. If you'd like to come down to the front. Yeah, that's fine. Again, you've got a shared 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've concluded the submission, and we will let you know when there is 1 minute remaining.
Right, good afternoon. I'm deputising for Miss Stoddart. Her objections are amended plans are still on overdevelopment from previous plans. It is an overdeveloped area as it is, so we'll go on to that later. And in the area which is sensitive due to the graveyard and Grade 2 listed church, which is the oldest part of the Armthorpe and should be protected. Reduced sense of spiritual area, of area noise issues, loss of privacy when attending graves of loved ones and burials. Impact of building works to existing headstones and burial plots. Previous owners are buried alongside the barn wall. Impact of disturbing foundations and building of the churchyard toilet block, which cost the church substantial funds. Properties. Proposed 5 properties equates to 10 cars at a minimum from experience of having adult children living at home at some point. There will be a possibility of 20 cars in the area. Inevitably, there will be parking on the Lichgate and Church Street, which will obstruct access to all church services and outreach activities. Impact on church services, weddings, baptisms, funerals and festivals. There already is a lack of parking near the church. Funeral weddings and wedding cars use the Lichgate to park safely without causing obstruction on Church Street, whilst people are leaving and getting into cars. It will also cause problems of access for those who are less abled when attending weekly church outreaches, namely Oasis, Coffee Morning and craft groups, and future plans of Dementia Cafe. Lichgate Lane is not a through road. That is evidenced by its design. School visits, children line up safely along the church gates, entering and when leaving the church and its grounds. Schools may decide not to visit church when planning their risk assessments, which would be a shame to both school and church engagement. Remembrance service is well attended by hundreds of people. The Service Association's band members and children stand in front of the Lichgate prior to laying of wreaths and 2-minute silence. Road safety is a concern. Main road is on 2 bends and is extremely busy with bus stops next to it and across the road. Getting in and out will cause problems to pedestrians, mobility users and cyclists. Access to church will be denied during the demolition and building process, and workers will end up parking on Lichgate and surrounding area, which will have detrimental effect to church and services. Drainage is already a concern, with rainwater already causing stand-up puddles when we have torrential rain. Work on the drains was completed a few years ago because of collapsing. I think that sums up comments from the church. I'm more concerned about the health and safety. I live in that property, which is the nearest one to plot 5. I'd be interested to know from the planning why the distance from the nearest property to the boundary wall has changed to my property. In previous building, it was a distance from the property to the fence. It is now a property to property. I'm also concerned about the health and safety and environment. The barn consists of asbestos.
1 minute remaining.
And the farm will have asbestos because it's a very old farm. And I would like to know how that will be controlled. And there are legal obligations on how to control the demolition of buildings and asbestos control. Same with the land. It was for tractors and farm implements, and there will be contaminated land. So again, this will have to be controlled. And finally, water is a big problem. We now have excessive amounts of water come down the lane because of the new developments. My garden gets flooded when it rains because of the inappropriate drainage that we've now got. Parking has been mentioned, and this access past the village gate, it's halfway up Church Street, and it's already a very busy place.
Thank you very much for your submission. Your 5 minutes is now completed. Would any members of the Planning Committee have any questions that they would like to ask? No? Okay then, thank you very much for your submission. We now have a request. Is Councillor Tim Needham still here? Oh, just a minute. No, it's Tim first, yeah. Is everybody for us to extend standing orders because it's coming close to 5 o'clock? Is that agreed? Is that agreed, everybody? Committee members, we need to extend standing orders because we're coming close to 5 o'clock. Is that agreed? Agreed, yeah. Thank you. Okay. We've now got Councillor Tim Needham who's requested to speak in opposition to the application. You've got 5 minutes. Press the red button when you're ready to start, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. And may I seek your indulgence just in case I overstep? I will speak as fast as I can, but thank you for that. Chairs, councillors and planning officers, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Councillor Tim Needham and I am Director Member for the City of Doncaster Council representing Armthorpe in this very chamber. Today I'm one of several representations from a large number of concerned parishioners from the village. I'm here to strongly object to planning application 24000808 on the grounds of heritage impact, road safety, accessibility, legal compliance and infrastructure concerns. This development threatens the setting of the Church of St Leonard and St Mary's, which has stood on its current site for over 1,000 years. The increased noise, traffic, visual intrusion from the proposed construction and development will undermine the tranquility and historical character of this sacred site. Additionally, vibrations from construction could risk structural damage to this ancient building. Heritage sites like this should be protected, not put at risk. And this meeting's gone on for quite a long today, so I've also learned that, and it's not in my thing, that there's the church has moved roughly around about, and so because it's been there for 1,000 years, and the church, where the farmyard is, I believe that's where the church used to be, and so there's a potential for the burial ground of ancient times to be there. So I'd also like the Disused Burial Act of 1991 to be investigated, because I don't think that has. Road safety, traffic impact and TRO. The development will be significantly increased traffic on Leash Gate, which has never been used for residential vehicles, and it raises some concerns. In Adam Fowler's Highways Officer's consultation reply dated 9th of January, required informatives include a traffic regulation order is planned to stop parking within the new development whilst allowing vehicles to turn safely. I suspect this to mean emergency vehicles and min lorries inside the development. However, the additional parking demand from new residents will undermine the effectiveness of this TRO, leading to congestion and parking on Leash Gate and restricting access to the church. In his report to panel today, it is an important point merely mentioned in paragraph 7.1. I feel this is a significant point that has been understated. TRO planning and consultation should be in place before the construction starts, not afterwards when it is too late to mitigate the consequences. Ensuring that the TRO is fully implemented before development begins will guarantee that safety measures are already in place when new traffic load arrives. In fact, I'm going as fast as I can. Excess residential parking could spill over into Leash Gate, further blocking safe access to church, particularly for elderly and disabled visitors who rely on clear accessible routes. The access road in question has never been used as a permanent route of access. The proposal would irreversibly change the character and function of the road, creating a permanent disruption. With double yellow lines on Church Street, parking on the main road is already limited. The corner near GJ's garage is dangerous and has recently seen a road user crash into a residential property. This forever change is for the benefit of just 5 new houses, while the historical and cultural significance of the church will be permanently impacted. The long-term prospects of a thriving church community will be severely tested if access becomes more difficult for worshippers, funerals and wedding processions and community events. The proposal fails to consider the needs of disabled people violating the Equality Act of 2010 and the public sector equality duty. The increased traffic and lack of pedestrian infrastructure will disproportionately affect wheelchair users and those with mobility impairments who require safe disabled routes, visually impaired people who rely on properly maintained workways, elderly worshippers and visitors to the church who may struggle with unsafe road conditions. Lack of a safe parking, particularly for disabled visitors, may prevent people with mobility issues from attending services or community events at the church. If parking becomes more restricted due to the development, disabled individuals could be unfairly disadvantaged, which may constitute indirect discrimination. The development could also be seen as a violation of human rights. Under Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, individuals have the right to access public spaces safely. Under Article 9, restricting access to a place of worship could interfere with religious freedoms. If people cannot safely attend the church due to traffic hazards, a lack of safe parking and poor accessibility,
1 minute remaining.
This development could legally be challenged. Development will also increase demand on overstretched local services, schools, they're already capacity, medical services where people can't get an appointment, road maintenance within significant traffic. Additionally, there are already 800 new homes being built in Armthorpe and a further 600 in Edenthorpe. To make matters worse, proposals are being planned to build significant more houses on the remaining line between Sherwood and the A630. These developments already place significant strain on local infrastructure, and further proposal of Brookhouse Farm alone exacerbate the pressure. In section 8.5 of the report, Dave Richards shows remarkable bias towards the approval of this development. He suggests that potential access issues related to the weddings, funerals and events could be dealt with by South Yorkshire Police. This suggestion is deeply concerning.
Thank you for your submission, Councillor Needham.
Okay, thank you.
5 minutes up. Do any committee members wish to ask Councillor Needham a question? I'll ask you a quick question. Based on the submission that you've sent out to everybody, is there anything on there that you specifically think we need to be aware of?
I think the new information about the Disused Burial Act, and also, because that's very interesting, and the issue around accessibility and disability, and as a sitting councillor, I know that that's not always taken into consideration properly and thoroughly, and that's an important matter, accessibility. Thank you.
You say that was the Disused Burial Act,
1981 to 1984, yeah, but I've only learned about that today.
Okay, thank you.
So that basically says that whoever owns the land has the duty to look after the burials there, even if the land's changed hands.
Thank you for that clarification. Does anybody else wish to ask any questions? No, thank you. Thank you for your submission. We now have a request to speak in opposition to the application from Ms Christine Broders-Brown from Armthorpe Parish Council. This is your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. please press the large red button when you want to speak, and again to mute the microphone, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Broadhurst-Brown and I'm the Chair of Armthorpe Parish Council. I am speaking on behalf of the Parish Council. We have provided some photographs to illustrate this presentation. The Parish Council opposes the planning application in its current form. While we recognise that efforts have been made to mitigate concerns, the Parish Council continues to feel that the proposals would be detrimental to St Leonard and St Mary's Parish Church and the village as a whole. The Parish Council is of the opinion that the application does not meet the requirements of ANP3 of the Armthorpe Neighbourhood Plan of 2018. This would be Article B, which is about layout, density, etc. Article C, which is about reasonable outlook and adequate privacy and access to daylight and sunlight. And Article D, which would the development should not significantly impact upon the living conditions or privacy of neighbours, including their private gardens, or be overbearing. Also, most importantly, I think Article L, access points, parking and operational highway requirements must cater safely for pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles, not be visually dominant, and in existing areas complement the qualities of the street scene and local highway functions. The Parish Council has received representations from residents and church users who are concerned about loss of amenity to residents, possible disturbance to graves, disturbance to the sanctity and peaceful and reflective nature of a very current graveyard, the closing in and crowding of the last space in Armthorpe that has been a long-standing and relatively unchanged space in the heart of our village. The Parish Council supports villages in all these areas of concern. There is a petition on change.org entitled Stop the Brookhouse Farm Development, Protect Our Heritage, Save Our Church Outreach. It currently has 772 signatures, and the link for this has been provided to officers. There is real opposition to this development across our community. A key issue for all concerned villagers is the issue of sole access via the leash gate. It may be helpful to give some background on the history and usage of the leash gate, certainly within living memory, and in my case that's quite a long time. The leash gate has never been a through road. It has long provided access and an associated space for the church and was used to access Brookhouse Farm. We understand that the leash gate was adopted in the late 20th century. However, the former farm owners did not use the leash gate for access. They used the access to the rear of the site out onto the unadopted road adjoining Barton Lane. So basically it's been used for access to the church and as a gathering place for the church for many, many years. So the gatherings include weddings, funerals, christenings, and for the villagers' acts of remembrance. There is no gathering space within the graveyard. The pathway is sunken into the surrounding graveyard. Funerals usually have at least 2 cars. We also have horses and carriages and all manner of wedding vehicles. The village war memorial is situated on the churchyard gate and the ceremonies are held on the leash gate. Parking is a major issue. The only available parking available to people using the church is on Church Street, leading up to the right tight bend at the junction of Mere Lane. The downhill stretch of Church Street is double yellowed. This parking is on a really, really busy road. The leash gate is used for parking for people who are disabled or elderly. It would be very problematic, if not impossible, to unload wheelchairs or scooters on the main road. The Parish Council feels that to add a significant number of vehicles to this mix, including residents' vehicles, which won't be able to park inside the development apart from on the driveways, deliveries and utilities, this would all negatively impact the community's use of the leash gate. It could cause anger, stress and conflict at the site for non-residents and new residents alike. To disallow current use would be to cause great difficulties for church users and could well result in people being able to attend for worship. It is likely that consideration will have to be given to moving the village war memorial away from that site. There is also the issue of demolition and development stage. The lish gate would be put under great pressure during these stages. There would be excessive noise and nuisance, and also lots of digging up when linking up to the utilities along the lish gate to Church Street. We're not a NIMBY village in Armthorpe. We've got hundreds of new development houses. We recognise we're going to be having new developments as well. But this is a small infill speculative bit of development, basically to make, legitimately I suppose, a business some money to the detriment of our village, and the benefits of the housing of the proposal are far outweighed by the detriment that would be caused to the village. Thank you.
Now, do any committee members wish to ask Ms Broadhurst-Brown a question? No? Okay, thank you very much.
No.
Right, we've now got a Mr Ian Barraclough, the agent for the applicant. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you're ready to speak, and again to mute when you've completed, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Hello. Well, basically, we've heard from the objectors, and basically it's a site which at the moment is considered by the government to be a windfall site. It's a brownfield site, it's a derelict site. The buildings on the site are of no in good enough use to be able to bring into the new standards in terms of sustainability for new homes. I mean, turning to the access, what we've tried to provide is to minimise the problems with getting in and out of the site, because by providing a turning head on the site, it's not a through road, it becomes a cul-de-sac. But what we can do is allow, this will be built to adoptable standards, to allow cars to turn round, and it's sufficient for a refuse vehicle. We've also extended the footpath into the site so pedestrians can walk down safely. We would then allow funeral cars, wedding cars, so they can turn, and everybody would go out in a forward gear, which is so much better than people at the moment, where they're having to reverse back onto the main road in Armthorpe there. So I think what we're looking at is we've taken into account the church. We provided 2 single-storey bungalows. We're providing a new wall along the western boundary to protect the residents. All the houses have substantial gardens. We've been sympathetic to the adjoining properties. All the drives are set back so we can give quality parking. At least the garages are, for instance, 6 metres by 3 metres internal, so they class as a very good quality garage for a car to park, not just as a storage area. We've got, where we can, turn in within each individual plot. The drives are 3.1 metres wide, which are more than sufficient for disabled users to get in and out of the cars. So this is a new step the Doncaster Council are taking, which we're quite happy as developers and designers to take on board, because we do appreciate that. You know, the old system of having a 2.5 metre, 2.4 metre wide drive, you can't get out your car once you get on your drive. These are all designed so they can be all used by disabled users. Similarly with the footpath linking into the site, a disabled user on the church side can go down there. I disagree with it being, you know, a small site which is going to be influenced by the profits of the developers. This is a small site which we're encouraged to provide by the government in terms of, you know, the land required. It's a low density site. It's actually it's actually 6 dwellings to the acre when you equate it into the size of the site. So that by no means is overdeveloped, as you can see by the amount of green space onto the front gardens, and the fact that we've got the minimum 10 metre back gardens, in some respects more, and we have considered where we've put the dimensions on the existing properties. We did, as I say, with the bungalows, we took on board the conservation officer's comments, and we incorporated that. And then the other thing, which is the quite substantial point, is about the barn. Well, this barn is obviously will be demolished, so anything which is involved with demolishing, we will do it under a method statement, so it's fully protected. And also, I've just learned today that the clients actually gave back to the church an area of the graveyard which they owned, which would they then let the council, the church take over. So in effect, I don't see why this would have any effect. I mean, in terms of car movements, it's going to be in the morning or a night time, but we're being told now we're encouraged to work from home. So I think I don't think this will be an hindrance to the church. I think if anything, because we're going to provide this turning space, it's the fact that the cars can turn is going to be a huge bonus for the church, and the fact that this could be to adoptable standards. So there is this about a traffic management regulation order involved just to do that. But at the moment, cars, what do they do now? The cars are just...
Thank you very much for your time, Mr Barcliffe. Do any of the committee wish to ask Mr Barcliffe a question? Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Which way do services come into the site?
The foul water goes actually into, there's a manhole in the site, and it goes back into the main road, Church Street. So there's a manhole in Church Street. So the foul will go back into Church Street, which is already there. So the connections are there. So that isn't a problem. Surface water, we know historically in Armthorpe that surface water soakaways will work. So we intended to attenuate on site with each individual house having a soakaway. This wouldn't affect, because obviously on the rear on Barton Lane, this site in some respects is isolated to Barton Lane, apart from that rear access which we just put into one of those plots, so it wouldn't ever be used. So you're not going to get any surface water runoff from this site. The road will be porous surface, either tarmac or block paving. So really, it's it's self-contained.
For my chair. So the water, what you're saying is it's self-contained. The services are on site.
Yeah, for the foul they are.
For
surface
the foul,
water will do to soakaways. So in the rear of the garden, there'll be
where does the mains water come from?
The mains water will go back into Church Street. There's already manholes there.
And then electricity.
They'll all come in. There'll be existing services on site. So we just obviously utilise the connections through.
And finally, my final one is, if obviously you wish to provide a turning space.
Yes.
Who would enforce any parking if it happened?
If it's done to adoptable standards, then the road can be given up for adoption, so that the local authority, highway authority, would then maintain it. It doesn't have to be. It can still be private ownership, but we will do it to adoptable standards.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions, Mr Barcliffe? No? Okay, thank you very much for your submission. Committee members, we're now going to go into debate. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the planning officer a question? Councillor Cox.
Thank you, David. But you whistled through. I'm sorry, we whistled through the photographs when I asked if we could see the bus stops. I have got concern regarding the bus stop that's on, not the one that is straight opposite, but the other one that's just at side of the entrance in to Lynch Lane. So if you came back a little bit further, there is a bus stop just to the side of the entrance, and obviously if a bus has stopped Nobody can see anything whatsoever. So we know that 90% of drivers are absolutely bang on, but those other ones aren't. And bearing in mind you're coming around a corner as well, I have got a concern with the placement of that bus stop and the potential hazard. How do we mitigate that?
In terms of the existing layout, as I've said, the access to Lichgate has good levels of visibility in either direction, as you can see. You can see the bus stop on this side of the road, so coming towards the access in the foreground. So the scenario would be a bus would stop, and I would, as a driver, stop behind the bus and wait. And the reason why I would make that choice is the pedestrian refuge area that's slightly bit further down the road would probably prevent some young Thundercat trying to overtake the bus whilst they're taking on passengers. But again, I think it comes down to making sure drivers have due care and attention. The road layout, in my view, is acceptable in terms of good visibility. Yes, the proximity of the bus stop is close to the access, but obviously that's a snapshot in time whenever a bus stop is picking up or putting down. But you would rely on road users in that location to exercise their due care and attention in making sure that they wait until the bus continues its journey.
Just to give you an idea of how many cars are going to use that junction extra, so you probably have one car every 20 minutes in peak hours. So then consider the fact that a bus might stop for 20 seconds. So when you take the risk factor involved, it's not great. So we class that as a low risk. The fact that that bus stop operates there now without any issues, I've not seen any accident data to say it is a problem. So it's as low a risk as you can get. To be honest, we would not consider the fact that 5 dwellings have been built and there's going to be one car every 20 minutes in peak hours to cause an issue. So to try and get it in perspective, there's absolutely minimal impact of this development on traffic. Minimal. In fact, I would say negligible. So that's in essence what you're looking at.
Thanks. Would the council adopt that turning circle, for want of a better word?
One of the reasons why we asked for the turning circle was to provide the facility, like Dave and Mr. Barcliffe have said, in relation to providing a turning circle so people can exit and enter in a forward gear. That's the most important thing with any adoptable road. So we have an adoptable road that is a problem at present. Now, that adopted road, this new development only ties into it. It doesn't alter it in any way to what it is existing at the moment. So all the analogies that have been put forward in relation to disabled access, etc., we aren't altering Leashgate at all. Nothing has been changed. Therefore, the development stands alone, works alone, but the one thing it adds to and improves on is the turning facility for wedding cars, for funeral cars. The fact is that it doesn't alter what's there now. Nothing is altered. It only improves. So anything to do with improvement is always a good thing. The fact is that we don't want that turning circle to be parked on, and that's why we're asking for a TRO. So there's always a reason. There's method in my madness, believe me. I don't just come up with these things because I think, yeah, it might be all right. So there's reasons why we're doing what we're doing, basically for the safety of everybody. So it's improving everything. Everybody has an opinion, so let's get it in perspective, exactly what's happening with that development.
Do we have any other questions from councillors? Councillor Cox?
Thanks. And on the drawings that you put up there, there's two map drawings, and I look backwards, like we said yesterday, in history over things, and one of them shows a well within. Yeah, I don't know if you've got that drawing, but one of them because I can't see it from here. But one of them shows a well within the development site. What potential of water contamination from surface from not from surface water, but from the water table? Because if that water is still there, don't know if it is or isn't. Don't know if the well's still there. Don't know. But is that been taken into account? Because it's on the drawing.
Yeah, so a few things there. So in terms of archaeological potentials, I will include a well within that. And that's the reason why we're imposing a WSI. So it's a low risk site. So the mapping previously, despite what Councillor Needham said, doesn't indicate anything other than historically agricultural. There's no evidence of links to the churchyard that I've found anyway. In terms of assets on the site, it's considered to be low risk. Clearly, it's been previously developed as well, so you've got a number of buildings within that and ground disturbance. But despite that, the WSI will go through the process of desktop study, potentially that recommends trial trenching, and for features like that from historical maps, they will target those features as part of those works. In terms of potential for ground contamination, we've heard that obviously the soakaways would deal with the rainwater from the roofs and then be directed to soakaways within the site. So inherently that's, again, low risk. It's rainwater, it's not contamination from other sources. And there's a contamination land assessment that will be conditioned on the approval as well. So that will look at the potential for, again, a desktop study of the site. Speakers have mentioned it's agricultural, so there is potential for contaminants, spilt, liquids, diesel, whatever, within the site. So that's common practice to look at that and then do a more detailed site investigation and then a remediation strategy as a result of that. So I would say the concerns that you've outlined there are material considerations, but we've included them in as part of the conditions on this application for archaeology and contamination.
Any questions from councillors to the committee? 12. No? Okay. Is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to condition? Is there a mover for the recommendation, please? That's been moved by Councillor Hogarth. Is there a seconder, please, for the recommendation? That's been seconded by Councillor Sophie Lowe. Can we show of hands of those in favour of the recommendation, please? Can you make sure you put your hands up so we can see? So we've got, full house. Okay, so therefore the application has been granted. Application number, right, I'm just going to say before we go on to the next application, is it agreed we'll have a 5-minute break for toilet? Yeah, make sure you straight back, please. It is now 15:15, so if we say 20 past, thank you.
Development of accessible local services and community facilities in accordance with paragraph 88 of the NPPF, which seeks to support a rural economy. Whilst the development is within countryside policy area, it is an urban fringe site, which it relates well with the surrounding built environment. Due to this, the development would be an acceptable form of development within its countryside policy area designation. The consultation phase has resulted in some minor amendments. Initially, there were some concerns about parking bay dimensions and the turning of delivery vehicles. These were addressed by the applicant and the Highways Development Control team have no objection. Public Health recommended separate cycle and buggy storage, which has since been implemented. Additional acoustic fencing has been provided around the rear outdoor space, and cemetery in response to the environmental health practitioners' comments. The local plan team initially noted further information was required about public consultation relating to the loss of public open space, and this has been provided. There are now no issues in relation to the principle of development, residential amenity, the impact on the character of the area, and on highway safety, trees and landscaping, drainage, contaminated land and ecology. These will be dealt with via conditions as well. So regarding drainage, we're going to have a pre-commencement condition requiring further information, details on surface water drainage from the site. Conditions are included to assess and remediate any potential contamination, and ecology have also requested pre-commencement conditions for a construction environmental management plan and an ecological enhancement plan, and the BNG information will need to be confirmed through biodiversity game plan prior to the commencement. So here's just some site photos showing both the car parking area, and then behind that, behind the palisade fencing, is the green space where the proposed development would be situated. And then I've also provided some photos of the residential dwellings surrounding the site, just for context of the street scene and visual impact. So overall, the proposed development would provide a new community facility in the area, which will bring together local services in an accessible location near the local centre. The community benefits of the proposal are considered significant. The development forms part of the Stainforth Regeneration Master Plan brought forward by the Towns Fund, as well as being included on the proposals mapped in the recently adopted Neighbourhood Plan. The development would be compliant with the development plan, and there'd be no material considerations which outweigh the social, economic or environmental benefits of the proposal. So on that, in this case, it's recommended that committee grant the application subject to the proposed conditions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Are there any questions from the committee? I've got Councillor Cox and Councillor Hogarth.
You might not know, but what happens to the buildings that are already supplying services that I think are intended to go into this one? Because there's a youth club building not far away from there. Then obviously there's the old library. What's going to happen with those?
Yeah, to be totally honest, I'm not sure, and it's not really been provided. That information hasn't really been provided, but obviously there's the scope for it to a change of use, or potentially in the future, or some other development for that site, obviously with it being relocated, those services being relocated to the community hub.
I think, so, if I'm right, some of those buildings are either maintained or looked after by the town council. Do they know what's going to happen to the buildings?
I think, Councillor Cox, we've got to focus on the application that's in front of us. It's not for us to actually state what happens to those buildings, and I'm sure they will have been engaged with about what's happening. So realistically, we need to stick to the what's happening with this planning application.
Sorry, Mum. Sorry, my mum's telling me off again. Yeah, I just wondered if you knew, that's all.
Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, just on the plan, it's for all the activities that's happening in the building. Can't see where the library part is and where office space is for the people who are going to be using it.
Yeah, I appreciate the text is quite small on the presentation, but it is in the committee pack. But the library will be in the Heart community space next to the reception of the site, the front of the site where the reception is. You can see that, yeah. And then the sort of a room, yeah.
where would the volunteers from that room go for the break?
So the other rooms around it, there's opportunities for activity rooms, medical rooms, there's other rooms which could be used for those purposes for staff, for rest breaks and stuff like that.
So it's saying some of the other rooms and facilities in there are multi-use and
Yeah.
multifunctional.
We've got the kitchens as well.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Therefore, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to the condition? Is there a mover for this recommendation? So that's been moved and seconded. Can we show of hands in support, please? That's unanimous. Therefore, that is agreed and permission granted subject to conditions. Item 6 is appeal decision. So this report's for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this matter? No, that's fantastic. Therefore, can we agree that it be noted? Is that agreed? Brilliant. Members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business at today's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and input and now declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody.